Hey guys and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of What If Naruto Was in Code Geass. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author link in description. Do you know anything about this weapon, Suzaku Kururugi? The question cut through the room like a blade. Suzaku lifted his head slowly, bruised face tightening as his eyes settled on the pistol lying on the table in front of him, sealed inside a clear evidence bag like that alone made the accusation true. For a moment, he just stared at it. How had it come to this? The battle in Shinjuku had already been a disaster. He knew that much. He had failed to stop the bloodshed. Failed to save Lelouch. Failed to understand what he had been thrown into until it was already too late. But this. Being accused of murdering Prince Clovis. If anyone in that room would have cared enough to listen, Suzaku could have told them the truth. He could have told them he had been inside the Lancelot. That he hadn't been anywhere near Clovis when the prince died. But the word of an honorary Britannian meant nothing here. Jeremiah Gottwald stood across from him with the cold certainty of a man who had already decided what the truth was supposed to be. It was the weapon used to assassinate Prince Clovis, Jeremiah said. The barrel striations confirm it. His voice hardened further. I also took the liberty of investigating your background. You're the son of Japan's last prime minister, aren't you? You had more than enough motive. Suzaku's eyes narrowed despite the pain running through his body. You've made some kind of mistake, he said sharply. I've never seen that gun in my life. The answer earned him violence. One of the purest faction men kicked the chair out from under him without warning. Suzaku hit the floor hard, pain flaring through his side before he could even catch himself. Jeremiah stepped closer, lifting the evidence bag just enough for Suzaku to see the gun more clearly from where he had fallen. Your fingerprints are on the weapon, he said. You're also suspected of murdering members of the Royal Guard. He looked down at him with open contempt. Admit it. Do it now, and you'll be judged as an honorary Britannian instead of as an 11. Suzaku pushed himself up slightly, breath unsteady but eyes still burning. I didn't do it. The kick came fast. It slammed into his face and sent him back against the floor again, sharp pain flashing through his jaw and cheek as the room tilted for half a second. Sir. The voice from the doorway cut through the room and made Jeremiah turn with a scowl already on his face. What is it? He snapped. I am in the middle of something. The soldier standing at the door straightened at once. Sorry, sir, but Minato Namikaze is here. He hesitated for half a second before finishing. To see the prisoner. That stopped the room cold. Even Jeremiah's expression shifted, if only slightly. On the floor, Suzaku forced one eye open through the pain. Minato. For a second, he thought he might have heard wrong. Jeremiah's voice dropped into something flatter, colder. And why, he asked, would the head of the Namikaze Corporation want to see this prisoner? The soldier swallowed. He didn't say, sir. Only that he was requesting immediate visitation. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. Of all the names he had expected to hear in the middle of this interrogation, Minato Namikaze had not been one of them. Not with the entire Shinjuku disaster still hanging over Britannia like a blade. Behind that cold irritation, calculation had already begun. Because Minato was not some ordinary civilian with enough money to be inconvenient. Exactly the kind of man who became dangerous when handled badly. On the floor, Suzaku pushed himself up onto one arm, breathing hard, bruised face turned toward the doorway as though he might somehow see through the wall itself. Jeremiah noticed. And his scowl deepened. Interesting, he muttered. Then he looked back at the soldier. Keep him waiting. The soldier stiffened. Sir. Jeremiah took one slow step toward Suzaku. No, he corrected himself after a moment. On second thought, bring him in. The soldier bowed his head and disappeared at once. Suzaku wiped blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand, trying to steady his breathing even as pain pulsed through his face and ribs. Why was Minato here? How much did he know? Had he seen the report? Had Naruto, Kushina or Mito? The thought hit harder than the kick had. Because if they had seen it, then they had seen him like this dragged across a screen and branded a murderer by the very people who had created the lie. Jeremiah's voice dragged him back. Try not to embarrass yourself further, he said coolly. Whatever little sympathy you think your old family friends may offer you, it will not change the facts. Suzaku looked up at him, bruised and battered, but still defiant. They're not facts, he said. Just your version of them. One of the purest men stepped forward like he meant to strike him again, but Jeremiah held up a hand and stopped him. No, he said. Not now. Heavy footsteps approached from the hall. The door opened again. Minato stepped into the room. He wore a dark coat over a crisp suit, his expression calm enough to seem almost detached at first glance. But there was something in his eyes that made the temperature in the room drop the moment he took in the scene. Suzaku on the floor. The chair overturned beside him. Minato's gaze moved once across the room, taking in everything without a word. Then it settled on Suzaku. And for the briefest second, something sharpened behind his composure. Not shock. Not disbelief. Something colder. Jeremiah noticed it at once. Mr. Namikaze, he said, his tone smoothing over into something more formal. I wasn't aware this suspect warranted personal interest from someone of your stature. Minato didn't look away from Suzaku immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was even. Then you've had a narrow imagination for some time. The room went still again. Jeremiah's expression hardened by a fraction. Minato stepped further inside, closing the distance just enough to make it clear he was not here to be intimidated by uniforms, rank, or the men who wore either. You said I could see the prisoner, he said. I am here. Jeremiah folded his hands behind his back. This man is accused of assassinating Prince Clovis and murdering members of the royal guard. Minato's eyes flicked once to the evidence bag on the table. Then back to Jeremiah. So I gathered. There was no rush in him. No open anger. That was what made it worse. Because men who shouted could be provoked. Men who stayed this calm were already thinking past the present moment. Suzaku forced himself up a little more, even though the movement hurt. Minato-san. Minato looked at him again. You should sit still, he said quietly. The words were simple, but they landed with the weight of something steadier than comfort. Something closer to certainty. Jeremiah watched the exchange, already disliking it. You know him well, then, he said. Minato's face did not change. Yes, he replied. I do. After all, he is like a second son to me. I would like some time in private with him if you don't mind. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed immediately. If you think I'll leave you alone with the prisoner so you can help him escape. Minato looked at him calmly. And why? He asked. Would I be foolish enough to do that here, in a heavily guarded compound? That stopped Jeremiah for half a second. Not because he believed him. Because the answer was too clean to argue with. Minato took one slow step further into the room, his gaze shifting once more toward Suzaku before returning to Jeremiah. I came to speak to him, he said. Nothing more. Jeremiah folded his arms behind his back. This man is accused of assassinating a prince of Britannia. And yet, Minato said evenly, you still have not proven that he did. One of the purest faction men bristled at that, but Jeremiah lifted a hand and kept him quiet. The room had changed the moment Minato walked in. Not in Suzaku's favor. Not yet. But enough. Enough that the men who had been treating him like a beaten animal now had to remember there was someone else standing in the room whose name carried weight far beyond a military file. Jeremiah's voice turned colder. You presume quite a bit, Mr. Namikaze. Minato's expression remained unreadable. No, he said. I observe quite a bit. His eyes moved once over the room. The overturned chair. The bruises on Suzaku's face. The blood at the corner of his mouth. He did not comment on any of it directly. He did not need to. Jeremiah noticed the 5 minutes, he said at last. One of the other soldiers looked at him. Sir. Jeremiah did not take his eyes off Minato. You heard me. 5 minutes. His voice hardened. And the door stays open. Minato inclined his head slightly. That will do. Jeremiah stepped back, though not far, making it very clear he had no intention of trusting the situation any more than necessary. The others followed, pulling away just enough to give the appearance of privacy without truly surrendering it. Minato waited until they had moved. Then he crossed the remaining distance and crouched in front of Suzaku. Up close, the damage was worse. Not catastrophic. But enough. Enough to tell him exactly how the interrogation had gone before he arrived. Suzaku tried to straighten despite it. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. Minato's eyes stayed on him. And leave you to this. Suzaku let out the smallest, tired breath through his nose. For a moment, Minato said nothing. Then, when he did speak, his voice was softer. I'm glad you're all right, Suzaku, he said. Kushina is too. A faint smile touched his face. Though I think Mito is going to be very upset with you because of this. That got the slightest reaction out of Suzaku. Not quite a smile. But close enough. Minato-san, he began, his voice rougher now. I want to thank you. You and Kushina-san, for taking me in after my father died. Minato raised a hand and stopped him there. Don't start talking like a martyr. Suzaku blinked. Minato's expression stayed calm, but his eyes sharpened. You are not dead, he said. And I have no intention of letting you talk like a man who already thinks he is. The words settled between them. Suzaku looked down for a second, jaw tightening. They won't listen, he said quietly. It doesn't matter what I say. Probably not, Minato replied. That answer made Suzaku look back up. Because there was no false comfort in it. No easy reassurance. Just honesty. But that does not make this finished, Minato continued. It only means you need to endure long enough for the truth to become inconvenient for the people lying. Suzaku stared at him. Bruised. Exhausted. Still trying not to let the room see how badly this had shaken him. Minato looked him over once more, then added, quieter still. Kushina wanted me to tell you that you are not alone in this. Something in Suzaku's face shifted at that. Small. But real. Minato saw it. And because he knew exactly how much weight silence could carry in a room like this, he let a moment pass before speaking again. Mito will probably yell at you first, he said. Then worry about you after. That earned him the faintest, most exhausted huff of laughter Suzaku had managed since he walked in. Yeah, Suzaku said. That sounds like her. Minato nodded once. It does. The smile faded from his face then, though not the steadiness. Listen carefully, he said. Do not let them decide what kind of man you are before this is over. Don't give them that. Suzaku's hands tightened slightly at his sides. I didn't do it. I know. The answer came immediately. No hesitation. No doubt. And maybe that was the first thing Suzaku had heard all day that actually mattered. Minato rose back to his feet then, adjusting his coat as he turned slightly toward the men still waiting beyond them. But before he fully stepped away, he looked back down at Suzaku one last time. Stay alive, he said. Suzaku held his gaze and gave a small nod. I will. And for the first time since Minato had entered the room, it felt like something in the air had shifted, not enough to change the situation, but enough to remind Suzaku that he was still standing inside it. Lelouch carefully lifted Nunnally out of her wheelchair and helped her sit down on the edge of the bed, before then picking her up and laying her down so he could pull the blankets up over his sister. That was Suzaku they mentioned before on the news, wasn't it? Nunnally asked her brother softly. Yeah. It looks like Suzaku's still alive. Lelouch confirmed, tucking her in comfortably. Nunnally turned to face her brother frowned sadly. We've been apart since the war ended. Big brother. What? Lelouch asked kindly. That news wasn't true, was it? Nunnally asked worriedly. It wasn't. Lelouch reassured her. He knew how close Nunnally was to Suzaku. She considered him a second brother, and Lelouch had to admit, he felt the same thing about the boy he'd grown up with. Suzaku was his brother in all but blood. Suzaku would never do anything like that. It's some kind of mistake. Nunnally smiled as she started drifting off to sleep, her right hand reaching out for and grasping Lelouch's left hand. Yes, it must be. Good night Nunnally. Lelouch turned off the light and walked out of her room, making sure to shut the door with as little noise as possible. Lelouch's eyes narrowed as his thoughts began to settle. Step by step, the chaos of the last day started arranging itself inside his mind like pieces returning to a board he had never truly stopped watching. Suzaku's arrest. Clovis's death. The military's confusion. The resistance. The strange new weapon in his possession. And then he realized something. He already had a plan in motion. He had started building it the moment he chose to act. Now all that remained was to see it through. What do you mean I can't break Suzaku out? Naruto growled, glaring at his parents from across the room. I can do it easily, especially if I use the Hiraishin. Minato didn't flinch. If you break Suzaku out now, he said, his voice hard and even, you won't be saving him. You'll be handing the purist faction exactly what they want. Naruto's eyes narrowed. What? Kushina folded her arms, still watching him closely, but she let Minato answer. The purists are already using this, Minato said. Not just to bury Suzaku under the accusation. They want more than that. They want the honorary Britannian system gone. That made Naruto pause. Minato kept going. If Suzaku escapes, he said, they'll use it as proof that an honorary Britannian can never be trusted. That the entire system was a mistake. Every Britannian noble and officer already looking for an excuse to crush the 11s harder will rally behind it. Naruto's jaw tightened. And Suzaku? He asked. He becomes the face of that argument, Minato replied. A fugitive. A symbol. Not of innocence, but of betrayal. Kushina's expression darkened. And every honorary Britannian in Area 11 pays the price for it. Naruto looked away with a sharp click of his tongue, frustrated because he knew they weren't wrong. I'm supposed to just leave him there. No, Minato said. You're supposed to think before you move. Naruto's hands clenched at his sides. He's getting beaten in there. Minato's eyes sharpened at that, but his voice stayed calm. I know. That answer hit harder than Naruto wanted it to. Because it wasn't cold. It wasn't dismissive. It was worse. It was a father's voice, steady even when angry, because someone in the room had to be. Naruto looked at him again. Then how can you just stand here? Minato stepped forward slightly. Because charging in and tearing open a cell solves only the part you can see, he said. The purists are playing a political game with Suzaku's life. If we move without thought, we help them win it. Naruto glared. So what? We just wait for Britannia to decide whether he lives or dies. Kushina stepped in before Minato could answer, her own voice sharper now. No. We hit back in a way that doesn't bury him deeper. Naruto looked at her. Kushina's arms were still crossed, but there was real worry in her eyes now. Not just anger. Not just fear for Naruto. Fear for Suzaku too. You think I don't want to drag him out of there myself? She asked. You think I'm not imagining 10 different ways to smash through that place? Naruto didn't answer. Because yes. He had thought that. Kushina exhaled through her nose. But your father's right. If Suzaku runs now, they'll say that proves he was guilty. And if the purists get what they want, every single Japanese person trying to survive as an honorary Britannian gets thrown under the wheel with him. Naruto's expression twisted. He hated it. Hated that it made sense. Hated that it meant standing still even for 1 minute longer. So what do we do? He asked finally, the anger still in his voice but lower now. Just hope. Minato didn't answer right away. That silence only made Naruto more irritated. Couldn't Namikaze Corporation issue a statement denying the allegations? All three of them turned. Mito was standing near the doorway, arms folded, her red hair catching the light from the next room as she looked between them with a calm that didn't quite hide how worried she was. Minato shook his head almost immediately. No, he said. Unfortunately, that wouldn't help at all. Mito frowned. Why not? Because it would be seen for what Britannia wants it to be seen as, Minato replied. Proof that we are too sympathetic to the Japanese. Or worse, too close to the resistance groups operating inside Area 11. Naruto's eyes narrowed. So just saying he's innocent would make us suspicious. In this climate? Minato asked. Yes. Kushina's mouth tightened. Especially after Shinjuku. Minato nodded once. The moment Namikaze Corporation publicly defends Suzaku, the purists stop treating this as one man's crime and start treating it as evidence of wider disloyalty. Not just his. Ours. Mito's expression darkened. They'd use us too. They would try, Minato said. Naruto let out a frustrated breath and ran a hand back through his hair. This is bullshit, he muttered, then turned and walked off before either of his parents could answer him. Naruto, Kushina called after him, only to stop when Minato reached out and caught her arm lightly. She looked at him. Minato gave a small shake of his head. Kushina exhaled through her nose, tension still clear in her shoulders, but she let Naruto go. Across the room, Mito had gone quiet. Her eyes stayed lowered for a moment, fixed on the floor as if she were trying to make sense of something too big to hold all at once. Then she slowly lifted her head and looked at her parents. Is Suzaku going to be alright? She asked softly. Kushina's expression tightened at once. Minato was quiet for a second longer than either of them wanted. Then he stood and crossed the room, pulling Mito into a careful hug. I don't know, sweetheart, he said honestly. Mito's hands tightened slightly in the fabric of his shirt. At this point, Minato continued, his voice low and steady, all we can do is bide our time and hope people start seeing reason. Kushina looked away at that. Because hope was not something she liked leaving things to. Not when Suzaku was sitting in a cell. Not when Naruto was angry enough to do something reckless. Not when Britannia was already twisting the truth into a weapon. Still, she stepped closer, resting one hand gently against Mito's back. We're not giving up on him, she said. You know that, right? Mito nodded against Minato's chest, though the motion was small. I know. But knowing that and believing things would be okay were not the same thing. Minato seemed to understand that too. He pulled back just enough to look down at her. Suzaku's stronger than he looks, he said. And more stubborn than he should be. That got the faintest reaction out of her. Like Naruto, Mito murmured. Kushina let out the smallest huff of amusement. Unfortunately, yes. That made Mito's mouth twitch properly this time, though the worry in her eyes never fully left. His Highness's memorial program was handled very well. Jeremiah stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking down at the man before him with the kind of measured approval that never sounded entirely safe. A bit too weepy for my tastes, he continued, but... Diethard Reed bowed his head slightly. Your Excellency, the masses do enjoy a tearjerker. Jeremiah's mouth twitched faintly. Spoken like a true television man. Whether it was praise or insult, Diethard couldn't tell. Jeremiah turned his gaze toward the screen still showing the tail end of Clovis's memorial coverage, then back to the producer. Still, he said, I acknowledge your skill. You did well in the short time you had. His eyes narrowed just slightly. One might almost think you were expecting His Highness to die. Diethard did not flinch. I'm afraid it's quite common to have memorial programs prepared in advance for important figures. Jeremiah gave a low sound that might have been amusement. For me as well. Diethard allowed himself the smallest pause. After this, we may make one for you, Your Excellency. Jeremiah nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing else. So I wasn't important enough to warrant one until now. He looked at Diethard again. How honest of you. Diethard held his expression steady. He still couldn't tell whether the Margrave was offended, entertained, or quietly pleased by the answer. I'm afraid so, he said. Jeremiah looked at him for another second, then changed direction without warning. Tell me, he said, has there been any official response from the Namikaze Corporation? That caught Diethard's attention more than the memorial discussion had. He answered carefully. Not publicly, he said. There are rumors of relief assistance, supply movements, reconstruction interest, but no formal statement. Nothing on record. Jeremiah's eyes sharpened at once. No official denial. No official outrage. No, Your Excellency. That seemed to satisfy something in him, though not in a pleasant way. Careful, Jeremiah said. Men like Minato Namikaze rarely remain silent without purpose. Diethard filed that away immediately. Jeremiah finally looked away from the screen and back toward him. Feel like joining the military. We have a need for information officers. Men of Diethard's caliber were not especially common, and Jeremiah knew it. The man spoke the truth cleanly, even when it was inconvenient, and without dressing it up in the usual layers of flattery that infected nearly every officer Jeremiah had to deal with. It was almost refreshing. Diethard bowed again, polite but firm. I'm afraid I'm not suited to the job. It isn't for me. You prefer the civilian network. A shame. But Jeremiah did not press it. Diethard was useful where he was. No matter, Jeremiah said. I have another favor to ask. That made Diethard focus completely. Tonight, Suzaku Kururugi will be transferred for court-martial. Diethard's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. His mind had already jumped ahead to the point. We'll get patriotic Britannians lining the roadside. Jeremiah's expression eased by a fraction. It is helpful that you understand so quickly. He turned slightly to his left, where Valetanu stood waiting in silence. Be sure his face can be seen clearly in the convoy. Valletta frowned. Lord Jeremiah, there are some among the 11s who've made Private Kururugi into a hero. Some groups may even be thinking of freeing him. Jeremiah did not look worried. Not outwardly. I'll be providing security personally in my Sutherland, he said. If any troublemakers show up. His voice dropped colder. I'll execute them on the spot. Colin had to force herself not to look disgusted. Out here, in public, she was Colin Statfeld, a proper Britannian student, well-spoken, composed, the kind of girl who was supposed to smile politely and nod along with the lies wrapped around this place. She hated that version of herself. Hated how often she still had to wear it. But Kazuki Colin had limits. There were places Kazuki Colin could not go. Doors that would never open for her. Rooms she would never be allowed to enter without a rifle pointed at her back. So for now, Colin Statfeld walked through Tokyo Tower with a calm face and clenched fists. Once, this place had been a symbol of pride for Japan. Now it had been turned into the Britannian Victory Memorial Center, a monument to conquest dressed up as history. Everywhere she looked, there were displays celebrating Britannian triumph. Pictures of soldiers and Glasgow's damaged cities turned into trophies. Framed photographs and plaques describing the occupation like it had been some noble act of civilization rather than a nation being crushed under steel. Not a single corner of it acknowledged the battles where the Japanese had fought back. Of course it didn't. Britannia didn't commemorate resistance. It erased it. The whole place made her skin crawl. Movement in her peripheral vision told her Ogi, Kento, and Toru had entered behind her. They kept their distance, careful not to look like they knew one another too well, but Colin noticed them all the same. They all suspected this could be a trap. She did too. Even after Shinjuku. Even after that voice had saved them. Still, the man who had intervened there had earned at least this much. They would hear him out. The Japanese did not leave debts unpaid. Not to the man who had saved their lives. And certainly not to Britannia for what it had taken from them. The only other people on the ground floor were a Britannian couple casually looking over one of the old anti-aircraft guns Japan had once tried to use against the original Glasgow units. Colin could have sworn the two of them glanced her way for a second, but when she looked again, they were studying the weapon like they had never moved at all. Tokyo Tower. 4 o'clock. Why here, of all places? It was Kururugi Suzaku who contacted us, right? Kento asked in a low voice once they were close enough to speak without drawing attention. Don't jump to conclusions, Ogi said. The three of them moved toward a glass display case and pretended to study the photographs inside. But he might have been arrested after he called Colin, Toru muttered. Then this place is too dangerous for us to stay, Kento said. Before any of them could say more, a sharp chime rang out over the speakers, cutting cleanly through the air. Miss Colin Statfeld of Ashford Academy, the announcement said, a lost item has been turned in for you. Please come to the service counter on the observation deck. Ogi, Kento, and Toru all stiffened at once. Their heads turned to the left and found empty space. Colin was already gone. They moved for the elevators as quickly as they could without looking suspicious, missing entirely the cheerful Britannian couple nearby who smiled and waved at them as if nothing at all was wrong. A moment later, the elevator doors opened. By the time they reached the observation deck, Colin was already at the service counter. You're sure this is yours? The attendant held out a cell phone. Colin took it and stared. It was brand new. Expensive too. The kind of model most people couldn't casually afford. On the back, neatly marked, was her name and Ashford Academy. Whoever this man was, he had prepared for this. That much was obvious. She kept staring at the phone, as if the answer might reveal itself if she looked hard enough. It's yours, isn't it? The woman asked again. Colin blinked, pulling herself out of her thoughts. Why yes, she said, forcing a weak smile. Thank you very much. She stepped away from the counter and drifted toward the windows, where the mounted binoculars overlooked the city below. When she heard Ogi and the others arriving behind her, she let out the smallest breath of relief. At least they had made it up here. She had no idea whether they were angry she had gone ahead alone, but right now she cared more about finally finding out who this man was. Then the phone in her hand vibrated. Colin looked down. The caller ID read 0. Her pulse jumped. She cast a quick sidelong glance toward Ogi. He gave her the smallest nod. Colin answered immediately. Yes. Hello. The voice on the other end was calm. Ride the outer tracks of loop line number 5. Bring your friends. Colin straightened. Wait. The line went dead. She lowered the phone slowly, eyes narrowing. He knew. He knew Ogi and the others were with her. Which meant he had been watching them. Colin scanned the observation deck as discreetly as she could, then almost cursed herself for the impulse. If this man, 0, had gone to the trouble of arranging all of this, he wouldn't be standing in plain sight on the same floor waiting to be caught. No. If anything, he was already waiting somewhere along loop line number 5. She turned back toward Ogi, Kento, and Toru and told them what he had said. That was enough. The four of them wasted no time after that, leaving the tower and heading straight for the station. It was time to meet 0. Colin looked around as she and Ogi boarded the last car of the monorail. If not for the automated messages droning through the speakers, the whole train would have been completely silent. Every passenger sat perfectly still. No one talked. No one looked up. No one even seemed to notice the two of them had entered. It was wrong. The seats were all taken, so Colin and Ogi stayed standing, keeping a little distance between them like it was coincidence they had boarded together. Even then, Colin could feel the tension crawling under her skin. The entire car felt unnatural, like the people inside had been frozen in place. Then the phone in her hand vibrated. Colin answered at once. Hello. Ogi stayed close enough to watch her reaction, but not so close that it would look obvious. 0's voice came through the line, calm as ever. Face forward and look to your right. What do you see? Colin did as she was told. Beyond the glass was the Britannian side of the city, clean, rebuilt, polished, elevated high above the rest like it had always belonged to them. The Britannian city, Colin said coldly. A stolen city, built on our sacrifices. There was a pause. Now look left. Colin turned her head. This side told the truth. The remains of what had been left behind after Britannia had squeezed Japan dry and called it progress. I see our city, she said. The city made by Britannia squeezing us dry. Good answer, 0 said. Now come to the first car. The line went dead. Colin's eyes widened slightly. He was on the train. Right now. Without wasting another second, she moved for the connecting door. Ogi followed immediately. They passed through the next car. And every single one was the same. Passengers sitting in silence. Passengers standing in silence. Not one of them reacting when bumped. Not one of them turning their head. It only got worse the farther forward they went. The cars became more crowded, but the stillness never changed. It was like moving through rows of mannequins that just happened to breathe. By the time they reached the first car, Colin's nerves were wound tight. Then she stopped. The front car was empty. Almost. At the far end stood a single figure with his back to them. Colin took one step forward, her voice sharper than she intended. Was it you? She demanded. Tell us. Were you the one who helped us in Shinjuku? Was the ceasefire you're doing too? The train entered a tunnel. For one brief moment, the windows went dark and the whole car was swallowed by shadow. Then the figure turned. Colin felt her breath catch. The mask was black, severe, and impossible to mistake for anything ordinary. A high-collared black cloak framed him, making him seem larger than he really was, more shaped than man in the dim light. He looked less like a person waiting for them and more like something that had been there all along, watching from the dark. Yes, the masked man said. I am Zero. His voice was calm, controlled, as if none of this was strange. As if calling them onto a silent train full of motionless passengers was the most natural thing in the world. What do you think of my little tour of this settlement? He asked. Then he spread his arms slightly, indicating the city beyond the glass on either side of them. I wanted you to appreciate it properly. The settlement, and the ghetto. Colin's eyes narrowed. Beside her, Ogi took that as his cue and stepped forward after giving her a brief glance. Yes, he said. There's a difference between us and the Britannians. A desperate difference. That's why we fight as the resistance. You're wrong, Zero said flatly. The answer hit harder than Colin expected. Ogi frowned. Wrong. Terrorism will not defeat Britannia, Zero said. Ogi stared at him for a second, thrown off not just by the words, but by the certainty behind them. Defeat. He repeated. A clash in the ghettos was one thing. A sabotage run. An ambush. An attack meant to hurt the occupation. But defeating Britannia itself, that was the kind of thing people didn't say unless they were mad. Or dangerous. Terrorism is nothing more than a childish nuisance, Zero continued, as though Ogi had not spoken at all. That was enough to make the anger in the car rise all at once. What was that? Kento snapped. Are you saying we're nothing but children? Toru demanded. Zero didn't move, didn't flinch. Don't mistake your enemy, he said. It is not the Britannian people. It is Britannia itself. The words cut through the tension for half a second. Not because anyone agreed. Because they had not expected him to put it that way. What you need, Zero said, his voice rising now, is to fight a war. A real one. Without involving civilians. Colin's jaw tightened. Zero took one step toward them. Attacking civilians of the nation accomplishes nothing. It is simple terrorism. And all it does is help Britannia rally its people against you, against your cause. His cloak shifted with the motion, dark and severe in the dim light of the train car. Don't you see? The empire itself is corrupt. It is Britannia that must be overthrown before Japan, and every other territory chained beneath it, can ever be free. His eyes, hidden behind the mask, still somehow felt sharp enough to pin all of them in place. So decide now, he said. Follow me, and take the path of righteousness. Colin stared at him in disbelief. The nerve of him. To summon them here. Lecture them. Talk down to them like he already knew what their fight was supposed to be. Her scowl deepened. Don't be absurd, she said. It's easy to stand there and say whatever you want. Words mean nothing unless you have the power to back them up. She took one step forward. How are we supposed to trust someone who won't even show us his face? She's right, Kento said immediately. Take off the mask, Toru ordered. But Zero didn't move. You won't show us your face, she said sharply. Then at least tell us if you have anything to do with the other guy. Lelouch went still behind the mask. What? Are they talking about that ghost she mentioned? I have no idea what you're talking about, he replied evenly. Colin's eyes flashed. Don't mess with us. Her voice rang through the car hard enough to make the others tense with her. Do you really expect us to believe that both of you showed up one right after the other, on the same day, and that it was all just a coincidence? Lelouch said nothing. Because now he was listening very carefully. Colin took another step forward, jaw tight. That guy in the fox mask is something that should be impossible, she said, and now you're standing here telling us your power is going to do the same thing. Behind the mask, Lelouch's thoughts sharpened instantly. What fox mask? What is she talking about? Something happened in Shinjuku that I didn't see. He was getting tired of the accusation already, but irritation would gain him nothing here. I am being completely honest with you, he said. I have no knowledge of what you mean. Colin looked like she wanted to call that a lie immediately. Lelouch continued before she could. As far as I knew, your group and I were the only ones fighting Britannia that day. That much, at least, was true from his perspective. He let the smallest pause settle in before adding. But now, his voice cooled further. I find myself looking forward to meeting this person. That seemed to ease some of the tension in Oji's face. After everything I've seen and heard, he admitted, it's getting harder to doubt you. But that doesn't mean I can just trust you because you say the right things. Zero gave a slight nod. If you did, I'd think less of you as a leader. The answer caught them off guard. Zero went on before anyone else could speak. If it's proof you want, then I'll give you proof. His voice stayed calm, but there was something hard underneath it now. I won't show you my face. I'll show you my power. He took one step forward, black cloak shifting around him. I'll prove that the impossible can be made possible. Colin's eyes narrowed. Ogi stayed silent. Then Zero gave them the promise that made the whole car go still. Tonight, he said, I will free Kururugi Suzaku from Britannia's hands. For a second, no one answered. Then the noise from farther down the train started bleeding into the silence around them. As night began to settle over the city, Naruto quietly pushed open the window to his room. The cool air drifted in at once, brushing against the dark fabric of the outfit he had worn in Shinjuku. The same black clothes. The same cloak. The same gear that made it far too easy to slip back into that version of himself. He stood there for a moment, one hand on the window frame, and let out a slow breath. Then a voice came from behind him. Naruto, what are you doing? He didn't jump. He didn't need to turn right away to know who it was. Naruto glanced back over his shoulder and saw Mito standing in the doorway, arms folded, red hair falling over one shoulder as she looked at him with that same sharp, accusing stare she had been giving him since yesterday. Naruto gave the smallest sigh. I think you know exactly what I'm doing, Mito. She frowned. Mom and Dad are going to be mad at you again. I know. Naruto turned back toward the open window, his expression hardening as he looked out into the dark. But I can't just sit here and do nothing, he said. Not when I can actually do something to save him. Mito stepped further into the room. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. Then let me help you. Naruto shut his eyes for a second. Of course she would say that. Mito, he said, turning to face her fully now, we already talked about this. That doesn't mean I changed my mind. It should. She didn't back down. Naruto should have expected that too. It's bad enough that I'm going, he said. You do not need to go with me. Mito's eyes narrowed. And you do. Naruto's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. The answer came fast. Too fast. Mito noticed. So that's it? She asked. You get to run into danger because you think you can handle it, and I'm supposed to just stay here and wait again. Naruto took a step toward her. This isn't about what you can handle. Then what is it about? He stopped. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? If he said it the wrong way, it would sound like he didn't trust her. And that wasn't it. Not even close. It's about me not wanting you anywhere near this, Naruto said at last, voice lower now. Suzaku's one thing. Breaking into a military convoy is another. Mito folded her arms tighter. So your plan is stupid. That still doesn't explain why I can't help. Naruto stared at her for a second, then let out a humorless laugh. You really don't know when to quit. No, Mito said. I learned from you. Naruto shook his head. Mito. No, she cut in, stepping closer now. You don't get to do that thing where you decide what's best for everyone and then leave before anyone can argue with you. Naruto blinked. That is not a thing I do. Mito just looked at him. Naruto sighed. Okay, maybe a little. A lot. Fine. A lot. For one brief second, the tension eased. Then it came right back. Mito looked at the open window, then back at him. You're really going? Naruto didn't answer. He didn't need to. Mito already knew. Her voice softened just a little. You really think you can get him out? Naruto looked past her, past the room, past the house, like he could already see the road ahead. I think I have to try. That made something shift in her expression. Not agreement. Not approval. Just understanding. Because that was Naruto. Once he decided someone needed help, the rest of the world stopped mattering until he moved. Mito looked down for a moment. Then back up. Then at least tell me the truth. Naruto frowned. About what? She held his gaze. Are you doing this because you think it'll work? She asked quietly, or because you can't stand doing nothing? Naruto didn't answer right away. Because the worst part was, it was both. And they both knew it. Mito saw it in his face before he said a word. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Naruto. He looked away. I know, he said. The room went quiet after that. Just the sound of night outside the window and the faint noise of the house settling around them. Then Naruto stepped forward and put a hand gently on Mito's head. She immediately looked annoyed. Don't. Too late. You always do that when you're trying to make me less angry. Does it work? No. Naruto smiled a little. Liar. Mito swatted his hand away, but not very hard. He let his arm fall back to his side. Then his expression turned serious again. Listen to me, he said. If I'm not back before morning, you tell mom and dad everything. Mito's eyes widened. That's not funny. I'm not joking. That made her stomach twist. For the first time since she walked in, she looked scared. Just scared in the honest way people got when someone they loved said something they weren't supposed to say out loud. Naruto saw it. And hated it. So he softened his tone. I'll come back, he said. I'm just saying if something goes wrong. Then don't let something go wrong, Mito snapped, the fear in her voice turning sharp. You always say stupid things like that and act like it makes it better. Naruto blinked. Then, very quietly. Yeah, okay. Mito looked away and wiped at one eye before the tears could properly form. I hate this. Naruto's smile faded. I know. He reached into one of the pockets on his cloak, pulled out a headband, specifically their father's headband, and pressed it into her hand. Mito looked down at it, confused. What's this? Insurance, Naruto said. That doesn't answer anything. It's not supposed to. Just keep it. Mito stared at the headband in her palm, then back at him. You're being dramatic. I learned from mom. That got the tiniest, unwilling breath of laughter out of her. Naruto stepped back toward the window. Mito's eyes followed him immediately. Naruto. He paused with one foot already on the sill. What? She held the headband a little tighter. Bring Suzaku home. Naruto looked at her for a long moment. Then nodded once. I'll do what I can. It wasn't a promise. That was what made it worse. Mito knew it. Naruto knew it too, but it was the only honest answer he had left. Then, before she could say anything else, Naruto pulled the hood up, turned, and disappeared out the window into the night. Mito stood there alone in the silence he left behind, staring at the open window and the headband in her hand, already knowing sleep wasn't coming back tonight. Any moment now. Any moment now. The broadcaster shouted excitedly over the live feed. Just look at the crowds lining the route. All of them waiting. Waiting for the man accused of killing Prince Clovis. Waiting for honorary Britannian Suzaku Kururugi to pass by. Waiting for the former 11. Inside the Channel 5 high TV van, Diethard Reed stood with one hand pressed against his headset, eyes fixed on the monitors in front of him. Camera 5 slow. Charles, have you got the crowd set up? His tone was steady, professional, but there was a sharpness underneath it now. Every angle had to be right. Every reaction had to be caught. Every ugly, patriotic emotion had to be packaged and delivered cleanly. Huh. The studio. Diethard asked into the headset. Let them wait. There's no delay. Everything's going as planned. His eyes shifted to the main screen. Then narrowed. Here he comes. On the broadcast, the camera zoomed in shakily. I can see it. It's Kururugi, the suspect. Coming down the main road from the Viceroy's palace was the prison transport, boxed in by 4 Sutherlands moving alongside it like steelhounds guarding a carcass. Far away from the road, in the quiet of the Namikaze home, the television cast a pale flickering light across the room. Minato stood with his arms folded, face unreadable. Kushina stood beside the couch, one hand resting against the back of it, her eyes fixed on the screen. Mito sat forward slightly, silent, fingers tightening just once around the edge of her sleeve as the transport appeared. None of them said a word. Back inside the van, Diethard watched the spectacle unfold through the lens. Then, for just a second, he switched off his microphone and exhaled quietly as the smile dropped from his face. This sham, he murmured to himself. I'm as corrupt as any of them. Outside, the crowd erupted as the convoy passed. Murderer. Scum. Damned 11. We want our prince back. Voices of resentment. The broadcaster declared over the noise. Voices of anger, growing louder. Voices giving proof of the love the prince's people had for him. Righteous voices judging the terrorist. Jeremiah allowed himself a small smirk inside his Sutherland. This was exactly what he had wanted. Public fury. Public unity. A clean, useful enemy. With this much support, the purist faction's next steps would come easier. Then a voice cut across his emergency channel. Acting Consul Jeremiah. Jeremiah's expression tightened. What is it? Vehicle approaching the main highway from 3rd Street. We let it pass as instructed, but... Now Jeremiah understood why the man sounded uncertain. Do you believe your target is a terrorist vehicle? He asked. A pause. Then. Well, sir, it's Prince Clovis's car. Jeremiah frowned. The prince's car. Whoever had chosen that vehicle knew exactly what kind of message that sent. Fine. Let them send it. He would answer it himself. Let him through to us, Jeremiah ordered. All forces, halt. He raised his right hand. At once, the prison transport stopped. So did the 4 Sutherlands guarding it. On the television, the live footage jolted as the cameraman tried to keep up. You dare desecrate His Highness's transport. Jeremiah shouted, his voice booming out over the road. Come out of there. He stood high in the cockpit of his Sutherland at the front of the convoy, directly before the carrier where Suzaku was being displayed for the crowd to see. 2 more Sutherlands held position at the sides of the transport, while the last one moved up behind it to seal the route. Across from them sat what looked, at first glance, like Prince Clovis's own car. An exact copy. It rolled to a stop in the middle of the road, its polished frame catching the floodlights and camera flashes. Then the Britannian flag fixed to its front suddenly ignited. Gasps broke out through the crowd as the banner curled black and turned to ash. And behind it stood a figure in black. A cape wrapped around his body, black on the outside, red beneath, its edges lined in gold. The mask he wore concealed his entire face, more helmet than disguise, its smooth faceplate broken only by the dark shape across the lower half that resembled a bird with wings spread wide. Beneath the cloak, his suit was dark purple with gold trim, a white ascot folded sharply at the throat. The figure took one step forward. I am Zero. Lelouch declared, his voice carrying over the entire street. The effect was immediate. Whispers spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons. Cameramen scrambled to catch better angles. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was he? What was he? And why had he appeared here, now, in the dead prince's own car? Then another sound cut through the confusion. Clapping. Slow. Deliberate. Every head turned. Standing atop the prisoner transport, between Suzaku and the 2 Britannian soldiers guarding him, was another masked figure. A fox mask. Dark clothes. Blonde hair barely visible beneath the hood. Naruto stood there as though he had always been there. As though appearing in the middle of a military convoy without anyone seeing him was the most natural thing in the world. My, oh my, he said, bringing his hands together one last time before lowering them. That was quite the entrance, Zero. For one breathless second, the entire scene shifted. Zero was no longer the only impossible thing standing in the road. Now there were 2. The crowd's whispers doubled. The cameras jerked toward Naruto. Even the soldiers nearest Suzaku looked startled enough to forget their training for half a beat. Then they recovered. Halt. Don't move. The 2 Britannian soldiers spun and raised their rifles at Naruto's back. He didn't even bother looking at them. Across the street, Zero's gaze narrowed behind his mask. So this was the one Colin had been talking about. The fox mask. Before Lelouch could say or do anything with that realization, Jeremiah snarled and turned his weapon on the new arrival. You. Naruto glanced over his shoulder just enough to be aware of him. That was all. Jeremiah pointed the gun in his hand straight at him, and before anyone could blink, Naruto vanished. A collective gasp swept through the road. One moment he had been standing atop the transport. The next, he was on the bridge directly in front of Jeremiah's nightmare, his back to it, as though he had stepped there between frames of reality. Like a ghost. Like a trick. Like magic. Naruto lifted one hand lazily. Now, he said, in the same tone an adult might use on an unruly child, there's really no need for that. Shock rippled through everyone watching. The crowd. The soldiers. The media. Even Zero went still for half a second. Because they had all seen it. He had not run. He had not jumped. He had disappeared. Far away, in the Namikaze house, the television cast flickering light across the room as Minato, Kushina, and Mito watched in stunned silence. Then Kushina folded her arms tighter and muttered under her breath, "That idiot." Mito's eyes stayed wide on the screen. Minato said nothing. Back in the resistance hideout, the others were watching too, packed around the television in equal parts worry and disbelief. They had been waiting to see what Zero meant when he said he would show them power. Instead, they got this. Tamaki stared at the screen, then scowled. "It's that guy again," he muttered, still clearly annoyed at being called a hothead before. Colin felt some of the tension leave her the second she saw him. The fox mask. The blonde hair. The same impossible presence that had cut through chaos the last 2 times their paths had crossed. Until now, she had been trying not to show how badly her nerves were fraying. Ever since this started, she had been painfully aware of how exposed she was out here. One wrong move, one suspicious glance from the military, and she could be shot before she had any chance to defend herself. But the moment the ghost appeared, something in her eased. Not completely. Just enough. Enough that she could breathe again. Thank God, she thought, feeling a rush of relief she refused to show on her face. If things go bad, he's here. Jeremiah, meanwhile, looked seconds away from choking on his own outrage. Just what the hell are you? He demanded. Naruto turned his head just enough to look back at him over his shoulder. The rifles aimed at him did not seem to concern him in the slightest. Neither did the nightmares. For all the attention fixed on him, he looked almost bored. I was hoping to keep that to myself a little longer, he said with a small shrug. But I guess now's not the time. Then he turned a little more, enough for his voice to carry over the road, the soldiers, the cameras, and the crowd. I am a shinobi, he declared. A beat. Then. You can call me Madara. The name echoed through the stunned silence that followed. Then the noise hit all at once. Confusion rolling through the crowd like a wave breaking against stone. Soldiers shifted uneasily. Cameramen tried to force their lenses closer. No one seemed to know what they were looking at anymore, only that this had gone far beyond a simple public execution. Even at the Namikaze household both Minato and Kushina stiffened at Naruto's choice of name, knowing the exact history behind that name. Why would he choose that name, of all names? Minato thought as he watched his son on screen. Jeremiah's face twisted with fury. Well then, Madara, he spat, I hope you're ready to die. He fired a single shot into the air. That was the signal. 4 more Sutherlands dropped from the carriers above almost at once, slamming down hard enough to shake the road before pivoting into position around Naruto. Their weapons came up in perfect sync, boxing him in from every side. All units, Jeremiah shouted. Open fire now. Watch out. Colin cried before she could stop herself. The warning was pointless. She knew it the instant it left her mouth. But she said it anyway. Far away, in the Namikaze house, the television flashed white with muzzle fire. Kushina's eyes widened. The bullets tore toward Naruto and passed straight through him. Or rather, through where he had been. Just untouchable for that single impossible second. The rounds struck the ground behind him in a spray of sparks and broken pavement. Minato went still. Beside him, Kushina stared at the screen, disbelief and recognition hitting her at the same time. Minato, she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. Because he saw it too. That impossible slipping through space movement. That moment where distance and contact stopped meaning what they should. The air in the room felt colder all at once. That, Kushina said, voice tighter now, that was like. Minato's expression hardened, eyes fixed on the image of Naruto standing untouched in the middle of a firing circle. Yes, he said. Neither of them had to say the name. The masked man. The one who had torn open space. The one whose attack had thrown them out of their own world and into this one. For one awful second, Kushina looked shaken in a way she almost never let herself be. Then Naruto moved. My turn, he drew a katana in one clean motion and disappeared. The crowd gasped as one. On the screen, he reappeared in a blur of steel and wind beside the first pair of Sutherlands. His blade flashed once, twice, chakra screaming along the edge in a slicing gale. Both nightmares lost their legs in the same instant. Metal shrieked. The two machines collapsed hard, crashing to the pavement in showers of sparks and debris. Back in the convoy, Colin's breath caught. Zero's eyes narrowed further behind his mask. Impossible, Zero thought, his eyes widening beneath the mask. He took out all of them. All of them, Colin murmured aloud, unknowingly giving voice to the exact same disbelief. Once again, every eye on the battlefield turned toward the blonde shinobi. The crowd, the soldiers, the resistance, even the cameras seemed frozen on him. No one could quite process what they had just seen. Two nightmares had opened fire on him, and in the span of a heartbeat he had vanished and cut both of them down like they were nothing. Naruto turned back toward Jeremiah and lifted his katana, the point aimed straight at the stunned Britannian. What's with that look? He asked, a smirk tugging at his voice. You really should stop underestimating me. Jeremiah's expression twisted with rage. Why you? He growled, glaring at the fox-masked blonde with open hatred. That was enough for Zero. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. Raising one hand, he snapped his fingers sharply, pulling everyone's attention back to him just as the rear of Clovis's car dropped open. Inside was a canister. The same kind of container the green-haired girl had come out of in Shinjuku. Jeremiah's eyes widened slightly. What in the? Jeremiah, be careful. Valletta shouted at once. He's got the. Yes, Jeremiah, Lelouch thought, a smile forming beneath the mask. You never saw what was inside, so you assume it's poison gas. His gaze shifted briefly toward Madara. And as for you, you may not know what's in it either, but if the army hesitates, you won't risk moving carelessly. For a moment, Lelouch almost felt smug. Even with Madara's sudden interference, he had managed to drag control of the scene back into his hands. You bastard, Jeremiah said darkly. His voice had dropped low enough that it sounded more like he was speaking to himself than anyone else. He's taken every Britannian here hostage, he muttered. And he's done it without them even realizing it. In an act of desperation, Jeremiah raised his gun and aimed it directly at Zero. You intend to shoot me? Zero asked, his voice cool beneath the mask. I think you understand the consequences if you miss. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. He knew the masked man was right. If he fired and hit the canister instead, then whatever was inside it would be on him. Every dead Britannian. Every scream. Every camera pointed his way when it happened. Reluctantly, he lowered the gun and signaled for the surrounding nightmares to do the same. Inside the high TV van, Diethard leaned toward one of the monitors. Unit 6, bring up the sound and get a camera on his face. Sir, it's too dangerous out there, one of the workers protested. TCH. Amateurs. Diethard grabbed a camera himself and stepped out of the van, already moving toward the road. Back at the Namikaze house, the television cast pale light across the room. Minato stood with his arms folded. Kushina stood beside him, tense and unmoving. Mito sat forward at the edge of the couch, her eyes fixed on the screen, one hand curled tightly in the fabric of her sleeve. Suzaku was still in that transport. Naruto was out there in the middle of all this. She said nothing, but worry sat plainly in her face. On the road, Jeremiah glared up at Zero. Very well, he said. Your demands. In exchange, Zero replied. This, for Kururugi. Absurd. Jeremiah roared. That man stands charged with high treason for the murder of Prince Clovis. I cannot hand him over. No, Zero said. You're mistaken, Jeremiah. He isn't the murderer. He lifted his head slightly, making sure the camera caught the moment. The one who killed Clovis was me. Colin's hands tightened on the wheel of the car. He's gone too far, she thought, her pulse jumping. There's no way we get out of this now. Zero didn't flinch. Think about it, he continued. For the life of 111, you save the lives of countless precious Britannians. I don't think it's such a bad trade. Diethard watched through the lens, smiling faintly. He's putting on a show, he realized. One big performance. Jeremiah's face twisted. He's mad, he snapped. Disguising this truck as His Highness's own, mocking us like this. He raised the gun toward Zero's mask again. Then another voice cut in. Ah, so you're the one who killed Clovis. Zero stiffened. He turned sharply and found Madara sitting on top of the canister as if he had been there all along, one leg bent, one arm draped over his knee, Fox mask tilted slightly in amusement. Tell me something, Madara said. What exactly did you gain by killing Prince Clovis and then announcing it to the world? Wouldn't it have been better if no one knew you existed at all? I did it for justice, Zero answered at once. Justice against Clovis for everything he's done. Justice for Suzaku Kururugi, who would be punished for a crime he didn't commit because no one would listen. Then he extended a hand toward him. And you, Madara, will you join me and fight for justice against Britannia? Madara was quiet for a second. Then he gave a small, humorless laugh. Justice, he said. That's a dangerous word. He rose to his feet atop the canister, balanced easily, cloak shifting in the low wind. People kill in the name of justice all the time, he went on. And they always think their reasons are the right ones. Zero's hand lowered slightly. Then why do you fight? He asked. Madara's answer came without hesitation. To protect. The word carried. Clear and simple. I fight to protect what matters to me. This city. This country. My home. The people in it. He looked out over the road, over the crowd, over the soldiers. It doesn't matter to me whether they're Japanese or Britannian. If they're here, I'll protect them. Back at the Namikaze house, Mito's fingers tightened again. Naruto's voice, even distorted by the broadcast, still sounded like him. Too much like him. She could hear the certainty in it, and somehow that only made her feel worse. Jeremiah had heard enough. Enough of this. He shouted. You two will pay for mocking the crown. The four nightmares that had been surrounding Madara shifted position, closing in around the disguised car instead, guns trained and ready. Inside, Colin felt the old fear starting to crawl back in. We are so screwed, she muttered. Then Madara appeared beside her. 1 second the roof of the car was empty. The next he was in the passenger seat, like he had stepped through the air itself. Hey, he said, voice calmer now. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll protect you. Colin stared at him. For a second, she forgot to breathe. Then she gave the smallest nod. And somehow, against all reason, the shaking in her hands stopped. Careful, Zero said from outside. You wouldn't want the public to know about Orange, would you? Madara's head tilted. Then he muttered, just loud enough for Colin to hear, okay, I officially hate this guy now. Colin blinked. What? Orange is my favorite color, he said, folding his arms. And he just made it sound stupid. Despite everything, Colin almost laughed. Zero tapped the roof of the car with his foot, a signal. Colin eased the vehicle forward. If I die, Zero said, projecting his voice again, then it all goes public. If you don't want that to happen, you will do everything in your power to let us go. Your prisoner as well. As he spoke, part of his mask shifted, exposing his left eye. Madara felt it immediately. A strange pressure. A pulse of energy. The same kind he had sensed before. His eyes narrowed behind the fox mask. So it really is him. He followed the sensation straight to Zero and felt it reach Jeremiah, not physically, but mentally. Subtle. Sharp. The closest thing he could compare it to was a Yamanaka technique, except it wasn't quite that either. Whatever it was, it worked. Jeremiah's expression changed. A second later, he began barking orders for Suzaku's release, ignoring the outraged protests of the other purebloods around him. Then Madara caught movement at the edge of his vision. One of the Sutherlands was lining up a shot. He vanished. Madara reappeared in front of the nightmare with his sword already drawn. One slash sent the shot flying off course and tore through the machine's weapon arm in the same motion. Before the pilot could react, Madara rushed forward and cut through its legs. The nightmare collapsed hard to the road. The other three opened fire at once. Madara kicked off the ruined machine and went airborne, weaving through the barrage before dropping toward the nearest Sutherland. His blade flashed again, severing one arm cleanly away. He spun with the motion and drove a Rasengan into the leg assembly of the second machine, blowing it apart in a burst of twisted metal and sparks. The crowd screamed. The cameras kept rolling. A third Sutherland launched its Harkins. Madara sidestepped both, caught one cable as it retracted, and let it pull him in. Halfway there, he sealed his blade away and formed a Rasengan in his free hand. The pilot saw him coming and panicked. He hit the eject button at the last possible second, blasting out of the cockpit just before the Rasengan slammed into the Nightmare's torso and ripped it apart. The fourth and final Sutherland fired wildly, trying to avenge the others. Madara kicked off the wreckage beneath him, twisted in midair, unsealed his katana again, and poured wind chakra through the blade. The edge extended in a screaming arc of green and white as he carved through the last machine so fast it barely seemed real. When he landed, almost nothing was left of it. Just the cockpit. And inside, a pilot too terrified to move. One of the TV announcers, voice nearly cracking with excitement, spoke over the footage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching this, not only has the mysterious figure Zero negotiated the release of Suzaku Kururugi, but the other masked figure, Madara, has destroyed 4 military nightmare frames in seconds. Just who are these people? Madara touched down and looked back toward the convoy. Jeremiah had already disabled one Sutherland and was turning on another. The last remaining machine refused to move at all. This way, hurry! Colin shouted, rushing past Madara after Zero, who now had Suzaku with him. Then all three of them jumped from the bridge. Madara looked around once, shrugged beneath the fox mask, and followed after them. Later, the resistance had regrouped inside an abandoned building, the mood tense even after everything that had happened. The adrenaline from the rescue was fading now, leaving behind exhaustion, disbelief, and arguments that no one seemed ready to let go of. Tamaki, more stubborn than ever, was still pacing around and refusing to give Zero any real credit. I'm telling you, there's no way that works twice, he snapped. No way. Tonight was a fluke. Ogi didn't answer him right away. He was leaning against a cracked pillar, arms folded, his expression distant as he replayed the night in his head. Then he exhaled. You've got to give them some credit, he said at last. That made Tamaki scowl, but Ogi kept going. Nobody else could have pulled that off, he said. Not the Liberation Front. Not me. His eyes lowered for a second before he shook his head. We always told ourselves a real war with Britannia wasn't possible. That all we could do was hit them where we could and survive the aftermath. His expression hardened slightly. But maybe with him, he said, glancing toward the other side of the building, and Madara. He let the thought settle. Maybe it is possible. Tamaki clicked his tongue, but didn't interrupt this time. Ogi's gaze darkened with a mixture of awe and disbelief. After all, he muttered, it's not every day you see one man destroy 4 Sutherlands in less than 10 seconds. Not far away, in another section of the building, Zero and Suzaku stood facing one another in the dim light. Naruto sat nearby on a flat slab of broken concrete, one leg drawn up, one arm resting across it, silent for once as he listened to the two boys he had once known as just friends talk like men standing on opposite sides of the same cliff. Suzaku's bruises were still fresh. His expression wasn't. That had settled back into the same frustrating, unshakable certainty it always seemed to find. This nation can still be changed for the better, Suzaku said, staring up at Zero. From within. His voice was tired, but firm. And anything gained through contemptible means isn't worth anything. Naruto let out the faintest breath through his nose. Then finally spoke. You really are serious about that, aren't you, Suzaku Kururugi? Suzaku's attention shifted toward him. Naruto tilted his head slightly, the fox mask still hiding most of his face. You're willing to believe Britannia can still be saved, he said. No matter how rotten it is. That's right, Suzaku replied evenly. I have faith in the system. I believe change can happen without war. Without killing. Without more people dying. He lowered his eyes for a second, then looked back up. I may not be able to free Japan from Britannia's rule. But I can make sure its people are free. Naruto was quiet for a second. Then pushed himself to his feet, brushing imaginary dust from his clothes. Interesting, he said. Three people with goals that aren't all that different. His eyes flicked between Zero and Suzaku. And three completely different ways of trying to get there. Suzaku gave a small nod. Seems that way. Then he turned and started walking. Zero's posture stiffened immediately. Wait, he said sharply. Where are you going? My court-martial starts in an hour, Suzaku answered without looking back. Zero's hand clenched into a fist. Are you insane? He snapped. The only reason they're giving you a trial is so they can find you guilty. The judge, the prosecution, even the defense, they're all the same. Rules are rules, Suzaku said. He still didn't turn around. And if I don't go back, they'll just crack down harder on the 11s, and the honorary Britannians too. But you'll die. Zero shouted. Suzaku's answer came without hesitation. I don't mind. That made Naruto's eyes narrow. He straightened fully now, voice lower. Tell me something, Suzaku. That finally made the brown-haired boy stop. Naruto's gaze stayed fixed on him. What do you think would have happened tonight if things had gone the way they were supposed to? Suzaku frowned slightly and looked back over his shoulder. What do you mean? Naruto's voice stayed calm. If Zero hadn't interfered, he said, Jeremiah would have used you. Not just to bury you. To push everything else he wanted. His tone hardened. Your death wouldn't have ended with you. It would have become an excuse. A symbol. The beginning of something worse for every Japanese person still trying to survive under Britannia. Suzaku said nothing. Naruto took a step forward. Everything you've sacrificed, he said, everything you're trying to achieve, it all would have been twisted into the exact opposite of what you wanted. For a few seconds, Suzaku only stared at the floor. Then he looked back toward Zero. If that's true, he said quietly, then I should thank you. He bowed his head just slightly. So, thank you. For saving my life. Zero didn't answer. Not right away. But Suzaku kept going. That doesn't change my mind. His voice steadied again. I'll go back. I'll stand trial. And if I'm proven innocent, then I'll keep doing what I can to change Britannia from the inside. Naruto watched him for a long moment. Then, more quietly now. Very well. But before you go. Suzaku looked at him again. Naruto's gaze turned distant for half a second, as if he were remembering something from another life. Those who break the rules are trash, he said. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Suzaku blinked. Naruto's voice lowered a little further. Someone dear to me said that those were words left to him from a student of his that he wished to pass to me. There may come a day when you have to choose between those two things. For the first time since he started walking away, Suzaku looked genuinely caught off guard. Then he gave a small nod. He had heard it. Whether he would understand it later was another question. Zero stepped forward again, anger finally cracking through his control. Don't be an idiot, he shouted after him. That made Suzaku pause one last time. A faint, almost weary smile touched his face. You know, he said, an old friend of mine used to tell me that all the time. Naruto's eyes narrowed behind the mask. He said I was a fool, Suzaku continued. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's my weakness. He took another step. Then again, his voice softened. Another friend would probably say I'm doing the right thing. And with that, he kept walking. No one stopped him. Not physically. Not even Zero. They all just stood there and watched as Suzaku made his way back toward the settlement, toward a trial that would almost certainly be waiting to devour him whole. Silence settled over the building after that. Heavy. Unfinished. Naruto let out a slow breath through his nose. With Suzaku gone and the night finally beginning to settle, he figured this was as good a time as any to leave too. Zero barely seemed to notice. Lelouch stood motionless, staring after Suzaku with a dark look on his face, his anger simmering just beneath the mask. Things had not gone the way he had planned. Not even close. And Naruto, as he stepped back into the shadows and made for the exit, couldn't help thinking the same thing. That was the best way to describe the couple of days after Madara and Zero revealed themselves to all of Area 11. For 2 straight days, the entire public conversation had revolved around the two masked figures, what they had done, what they wanted, and who in the world could possibly be under those masks. Rumors spread faster than facts ever could. 1 hour people were arguing over whether Zero was some nobleman turned traitor, the next they were insisting Madara had to be some kind of monster in human skin. Another piece of news had spread just as quickly. Second Princess Cornelia Lee Britannia was on her way to Area 11 to take over as Viceroy and hunt down the two masked men personally. More specifically, the public version of the story made it clear that she wanted Zero for the murder of her half-brother, Clovis. Naruto sat behind the kitchen table, finishing off the last of a stack of homework he had while the television in the room played the same footage yet again. The procession. The bridge. The chaos. Then the broadcast switched to side-by-side images of Zero and Madara, both framed in red warning graphics while the reporter once again questioned the identities of the two masked figures and reminded viewers just how dangerous they were supposed to be. Beneath the images was a list of accusations. 0. Murder of Prince Clovis, abduction of Suzaku Kururugi. Madara, obstruction of military operations, aiding 0, destruction of Britannian nightmare frames. Mito sat off to the side on the couch, one leg crossed over the other, watching the screen with narrowed eyes. Well, she said at last, you definitely know how to make an entrance. Naruto didn't look up right away. That bad, huh? Mito gave him a flat look. They're trying to decide which of you is the bigger threat. That made Naruto pause and glance toward the screen just as the news feed replayed the footage of Madara on the bridge. They had slowed it down as much as they could, showing him avoiding the Sutherland gunfire frame by frame, trying to make something understandable out of something they very clearly did not understand. They've got 0, Mito continued, the one who killed Clovis. Then her eyes shifted back to Naruto. And you, Madara, the one some of them are calling superhuman because of what you did to those nightmares. Naruto snorted softly and leaned back in his chair. Yeah, that sounds about right. Mito folded her arms. So, she said, any reason you're not at school today? Naruto pointed a thumb vaguely toward himself. First of all, I'm not skipping. Mito raised an eyebrow. Naruto sat up a little straighter, already sounding defensive. Dad called the school and let them know I wouldn't be in today. Mito stared at him for a second. You had Dad call the school for you. Naruto frowned. I didn't have him do anything. He just did it. From near the doorway, Kushina let out a quiet huff. Because after what you pulled, she said, you were not walking back into Ashford like nothing happened. Naruto looked over at her. You say that like I was going to. Kushina gave him a look that made it very clear she did, in fact, believe exactly that. What you did was reckless, she said. Let alone using that name. Naruto clicked his tongue. It worked. And plus people don't know what Madara's name brings. That doesn't make it less reckless. It kind of does. No, Kushina said flatly, it really doesn't. Mito looked between them, then back to Naruto. So if you're not skipping, she said, what's the excuse? Naruto turned back toward the desk and picked up one of the reconstruction reports lying there. It's not an excuse, he said. Today the reconstruction of Shinjuku officially starts. Naruto looked down at the homework in his hand, then at the television, where footage of damaged streets and collapsed structures was now replacing the bridge battle for a segment on recovery efforts. I want to oversee it personally, he said. Mito studied him quietly for a second. Then asked, because of what happened there. Naruto didn't answer right away. He didn't really need to. Kushina's expression softened, though only a little. Naruto set the report back down and leaned forward, elbows on the desk. If Namikaze Corporation's going to help rebuild it, he said, then I want to be there. Mito's gaze shifted briefly to the screen again, where Shinjuku's ruins were being framed in clean corporate language and careful public statements. Then back to her brother. That actually sounds responsible, she said. Naruto looked offended. Wow. Thanks. Kushina folded her arms tighter, but there was less heat in it now. Responsible or not, she said, you're still not turning this into another stunt. Naruto groaned. Mom. I mean it. He opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because one look at her face made it clear he would lose that fight immediately. So instead he slumped back in his chair and muttered, "You all take the fun out of everything." Mito almost smiled. Rebuilding a city isn't supposed to be fun. Naruto pointed at her. That sounds suspiciously like something Dad would say. It's called having common sense. Yeah, well, Naruto muttered, glancing back at the screen where Madara's image was still lingering in one corner of the news graphic. That's never really been my thing. And judging by the way Kushina sighed and Mito looked away to hide the smallest hint of amusement, neither of them could argue with that. Lelouch had not expected to come back to the clubhouse and find his life somehow even more complicated than it had been the night before. And yet there she was. CC. Alive. Very much alive. And, for reasons he still did not understand, entirely comfortable making herself at home beside Nunnally as if getting shot and left for dead in Shinjuku had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Now she was in his room, stretched out across his bed with a stack of magazines spread around her and a slice of pizza in hand, flipping pages like she had every right in the world to be there. Lelouch sat at his desk, trying very hard not to let his irritation show too plainly. It was not working. CC, he said at last. That got her attention, if only barely. She didn't look up from the magazine in her hands as she took another bite of pizza. What is it? Lelouch turned in his chair to face her properly. Have you given anyone else the power of Geass? That made her pause. Only for a second. But Lelouch saw it. Slowly, CC lowered the magazine just enough to look at him, her expression still unreadable. Why? She asked. Lelouch's eyes narrowed. Because of course she would answer a question with another question. Madara, he said. The name alone sharpened his tone. What he did last night shouldn't have been possible, Lelouch continued. The speed, the way he moved, the way he tore through those nightmares, his gaze hardened slightly. The only explanation I could think of was that he might also have some kind of power like mine. CC watched him quietly as he spoke. If that were true, Lelouch said, then you would be the most likely source. That much, at least, seemed to amuse her a little. Not enough to smile. Just enough to make it clear she had expected something more dramatic from him. Oh, she said. So that's what this is about. Lelouch did not appreciate the tone. Well, he pressed. CC turned another page in the magazine and answered with the same maddening calm she used for everything. No. Lelouch's expression didn't change, but the answer did not ease his thoughts at all. No. He repeated. I didn't give Madara Geass, CC said. If that's what you're asking. That ruled out the most obvious possibility. Which only made the whole thing worse. Because if Madara's abilities had not come from her, then they came from somewhere else. Or from him. Neither option was comforting. Lelouch looked away for a moment, thinking. Then asked the next question immediately. Could someone else have given it to him? CC was quiet again. This time the pause was longer. Then she answered. No. And just like that, she returned to her pizza and her magazines, as if the subject no longer interested her. Lelouch stared at her for a second longer, but it was obvious he was not getting anything more out of her. Not now. Maybe not ever, if she could help it. So he turned back toward the computer on his desk instead, jaw tightening slightly as he pulled up what information the public networks were already circulating about the previous night. More specifically, he started searching for anything he could find on what had happened to Suzaku after he went back to face his court-martial. When Naruto arrived at the reconstruction site, he cut the engine on his bike and took a moment to look over what was left of Shinjuku. The district had already been scarred by war, and then a few days ago it had been torn open all over again. His eyes lingered for a second on the distant remains of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government building before he finally turned and headed toward the group gathered waiting for him. Once he stepped in front of them, the talking died down. Naruto looked over the crowd and wasn't surprised by what he saw. Everyone who had come to help rebuild Shinjuku was Japanese. All right, Naruto said, raising his voice enough for everyone to hear. Before we get started, I want to make a few things clear. The crowd quieted further. As of right now, all of you are employees of Namikaze Corporation. That means while you're working here, you'll be expected to follow the same general procedures as any other Namikaze employee. From there, he went through everything they needed to know. Work expectations, safety rules, how the supplies would be handled, what kind of pay and support they would receive while the reconstruction was underway. He made it clear that professional construction companies would be brought in for anything too large or dangerous for them to handle alone, but for the first few days, the focus would be simpler. Clearing debris, recovering the dead, giving the district enough order that the real rebuilding could begin. When he was done, Naruto looked over the crowd again. Any questions? Yeah, I've got one. The shout came from the middle of the gathered workers. Naruto turned and found Tamaki standing there with the rest of the resistance nearby, all of them already looking tired of whatever he was about to say. Why the hell are we listening to some snot-nosed brat like you? Tamaki demanded. We're supposed to believe the head of this company wants to help us, and instead he sends a kid. How do we know this isn't just some joke? Or that when all this is done, your company won't take whatever little we've got left? That's enough, Tamaki, Ogi muttered, though there was more resignation than heat in his voice. Naruto just smiled faintly. You're kind of a hothead, aren't you? Tamaki's face immediately darkened. The others around him started chuckling under their breath. By the look on his face, he remembered exactly who had said those same words to him before. Why you? Tamaki growled. Naruto lifted a hand and cut him off before he could really get going. Anyway, I probably should have introduced myself first, he said, this time speaking to the whole crowd again. I'm Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. And like our friend here so politely pointed out, yes, I'm the son of the head of this stupid company. That got a few smiles out of the crowd. As for whether we're serious about helping, Naruto glanced around at the ruined district behind them before looking back at the people in front of him. I could stand here all day and list everything Namikaze Corporation has done to improve conditions for the Japanese both before and after the war. But in the end, none of that matters if you don't believe me. His tone steadied. So I'll make this simple. I'm not forcing anyone to work here. And whether you help or not, I'm rebuilding Shinjuku. That got their attention. If any of you feel like you can't trust me enough to work with me, Naruto said, you're free to leave. No one moved. Naruto looked over them once more. Then smiled. All right then, he said. Let's get started. He turned and pointed at the area map he had set up nearby. We're starting here today. Then he shrugged off his black cargo jacket, revealing the orange shirt underneath, tossed the jacket onto a nearby table, and grabbed one of the tools himself. That was enough to get Oji's attention. He said, frowning slightly. What exactly are you doing? Naruto looked at him like the answer should have been obvious. You didn't think I was just going to stand around and watch everyone else work, did you? Judging by the look on several faces around the site, that was exactly what many of them had thought. A little later, as the work began in earnest, Naruto noticed Ogi having trouble with one section of broken concrete and metal. It wasn't that he couldn't handle it. It was that he was trying to do too much at once, keeping an eye on the workers around him, helping move debris, and constantly checking to make sure Tamaki didn't start another argument. Naruto walked over. Hey, got a sec? The older man looked up. Yeah. Naruto glanced at the pile in front of him, then back at him. You look like you are trying to do 3 jobs at once. Ogi gave a tired half smile. That obvious? A little. Naruto let the moment sit for a second, then said, I need someone here I can trust to keep things moving when I can't be on site. Oji's expression changed slightly. Naruto kept going. As much as I'd like to stay here all day, every day, I've got other things I'll need to handle. So when I'm not here, I need someone who can keep everyone organized, make sure supplies are where they need to be, and keep this whole thing from turning into chaos. Ogi blinked once. You want me to do that? Naruto nodded. Yeah, I do. Tamaki, who had apparently been listening from nearby whether anyone wanted him to or not, immediately frowned. Hold on, you're just handing him that. Naruto looked over at him. Would you prefer I give it to you? Tamaki opened his mouth. Then scowled. No. That's what I thought. A couple people nearby laughed. Ogi still looked surprised. Are you sure? He asked. Naruto raised a brow. Are you trying to talk me out of it? No, Ogi said quickly. I'm just asking what exactly you'd need me to do. Nothing impossible, Naruto replied. He led him over to one of the nearby tables where some papers had been laid out. Mostly you'd be overseeing people here when I'm gone. Directing work, keeping things organized, making sure we don't run short on supplies, and making sure everyone's actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. He tapped the papers with one finger. There'll be some paperwork too. Nothing too bad. I'll walk you through it. Then he added, almost as an afterthought. And yeah, you'll get paid more for taking on the extra work. Ogi looked down at the papers, thinking it through. Then back at the people already clearing rubble behind them. Then at Naruto. After a moment, he nodded. All right, he said. I'll do it. Naruto grinned. Good. Then he folded his arms and gave Ogi a look that was just a little too amused. There is one thing I should probably know first, though. Ogi frowned. What's that? Naruto's grin widened. I should probably know the name of the guy I'm making my assistant for this project. That finally got a more genuine laugh out of a few of the workers nearby. Ogi shook his head. Konami Ogi, he said, offering his hand. Though most people just call me Ogi. Naruto took it without hesitation. Good to meet you, Ogi, he said, shaking his hand firmly. I'm counting on you. Case number 107. Private Suzaku Kururugi of the Area 11 Military Force. The judge's voice echoed through the nearly empty courtroom. In the matter of the murder of His Highness Prince Clovis, you are no longer considered a suspect and are hereby released due to lack of evidence. The gavel came down. Just like that, it was over. Suzaku stood there for a second, still trying to catch up with what had just happened. That was it. No prosecutor. No defense. No real trial at all. Just a judge, a ruling, and a dismissal so abrupt it felt less like justice and more like someone had decided it was no longer useful to keep him there. By the time Suzaku stepped out of the courtroom, most of the building already felt empty. The officials had cleared out as quickly as they could, like none of them wanted to linger near the case any longer than necessary. Suzaku adjusted the strap of his bag and frowned slightly as he walked. It didn't make sense. Not really. They had dragged him across television screens, called him a murderer, beaten him bloody, and then suddenly, nothing. Released. Because of a lack of evidence. His thoughts turned, almost against his will, to Minato. Had he done something? Suzaku didn't know. Minato had come to see him. That much was real. And not long after that, the whole thing had started to unravel. He couldn't prove the connection. But he couldn't ignore it either. Before he could think on it any longer, a shout rang out above him. Out of the way, please. Suzaku looked up just in time to see a girl falling from above. What the? Look out below. He dropped his bag without thinking and lunged forward, catching her in both arms before she could hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected. Light enough that the impact barely drove him back a step. Suzaku steadied them both, then carefully lowered her back onto her feet. Are you all right? He asked. Only then did he really look at her. Long pink hair. Violet eyes. A face that hit him with the immediate, distracting thought of beautiful before he could stop it. And on top of that, she seemed strangely familiar, though he couldn't place why. The girl blinked, then smiled with hurried embarrassment. I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was down here when I jumped. Well, Suzaku said, glancing up toward where she'd fallen from, I wasn't exactly expecting a girl to come falling out of the sky into my arms either. That seemed to catch her attention in a different way. She stared at him for a second. Oh my. Suzaku shifted slightly. Is something wrong? The last thing he needed today was one more misunderstanding. The girl straightened, as though only just remembering herself. Oh. Yes, there is something wrong. She leaned in a little. The truth is, bad people are after me. Suzaku frowned. So, considering the circumstances, could you help me? She asked, clasping her hands together lightly. Please. He glanced up toward the window she had apparently come from, then back at her. Something about the story felt off. Very off. But she was still a Britannian girl standing in front of him asking for help, and Suzaku had never been very good at turning away from that sort of thing. Also, if he was being honest with himself, it did not help that she was extremely pretty. He crushed that thought immediately. All right, he said. Come on. As they started walking, Suzaku slipped on a pair of sunglasses, more out of instinct than anything else. Just because the court had released him didn't mean the rest of the world had stopped seeing him as the man accused of killing a prince. The girl glanced at him, then smiled. We haven't introduced ourselves, have we? She turned her face away for half a second before adding, my name is, Yuffie. Yuffie. Suzaku repeated. Yes, she said brightly. Yuffie. Suzaku nodded once. My name is. Don't tell me, she cut in cheerfully. I already know. Suzaku blinked. She looked at him with open interest now. You're a celebrity, she said. The son of Prime Minister Genbu Kururugi. Private Suzaku Kururugi. That made him stop. Then he quickly glanced around before lowering his voice. You lied before, he said. No one's chasing you, are they? She didn't answer. Instead, when Suzaku turned back toward her, he found she had wandered a few steps away and was crouched near a stray cat that had an injured paw. Meow, 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 she said softly. Ah, does your paw hurt? Oh. The cat hissed at her. She didn't seem bothered. Meow, meow, meow. The moment she touched the cat on its head, it calmed down almost instantly and let her pet it. The second cat watched for half a second, then accepted her other hand too. Meow. Meow. She smiled and picked them both up carefully. Then she held them out toward Suzaku. He hesitated, then reached toward the first one. The cat bit his finger immediately. Oh my! Yuffie gasped. Suzaku jerked his hand back, though it took a second because the cat seemed strangely determined not to let go. When he finally managed to pull free, he slightly glared at the cat. Are you alright, Suzaku? Yuffie asked. Yeah, he said, wincing slightly. I'm fine. See. No blood. We should bandage it anyway, she said, already turning her attention to the injured paw again. And this little one needs help too. The cats settled comfortably in her arms, purring like they had known her for years. Cute, she murmured. Suzaku found himself smiling despite the day he'd had. How do you think that one got hurt? Arthur says he had a bad landing, Yuffie said. The cat meowed. Suzaku blinked. Arthur. She looked at him like that should have been obvious. Suzaku had to fight back a laugh. Did he introduce himself? No, Yuffie said with a perfectly serious smile. But that's still his name. By the time they reached a nearby shop, Suzaku had bandaged his finger, while Yuffie finished wrapping Arthur's paw. The cat sat there calmly the entire time, as if it had decided she was trustworthy and that was the end of it. Once she finished, she looked over at Suzaku. Do you have trouble with cats? I like them just fine, he said, reaching toward Arthur one more time. Arthur hissed at him immediately. Suzaku sighed. The attraction isn't mutual, however. Yuffie smiled. I think unrequited love is a sign of a kind person. Before Suzaku could think of any answer to that, the cat suddenly leapt free and darted down the street. Ah, Yuffie said, watching them go. The kitty ran away. Euphemia looked around with open wonder, her violet eyes taking in the street, the shops, the ordinary people moving through the afternoon as if none of them realized who was standing among them. You know, she said softly, being here is just like being in Britannia. I feel right at home. Suzaku glanced at her. Are you from the homeland? Euphemia smiled and nodded. Uh-huh. I was a student there up until last week. Suzaku blinked. Last week. He looked at her a little more carefully now, trying to make sense of her. So what are you doing now? He asked. And by student, do you mean high school? You can go sightseeing anytime, can't you? That earned a small laugh from her. Heh heh. You ask a lot of questions. Suzaku stiffened immediately. Ah, sorry. Euphemia waved it off at once. Oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. Her smile softened. It's just, she looked ahead for a moment before continuing. Today is the last day of my vacation. I wanted to see as much of Area 11 as I could, because I wanted to know what kind of place it really is. Suzaku was quiet for a second. Then he said, well, you didn't need me for that. Euphemia turned toward him, the answer coming easily. No, she said, I'm glad I could see it with you. Suzaku looked at her, caught slightly off guard by how simply she said it. Then a faint, uncertain smile touched his face. Is that right? Euphemia slowed for a moment, then turned toward Suzaku with a gentleness that made the request feel heavier before she even said it. Suzaku, she said softly, would you mind taking me to one more place, please? Suzaku straightened a little and gave her a small, polite smile. Your wish is my command, my lady. Where to? Euphemia met his eyes. Take me to Shinjuku. Suzaku stopped. The smile faded almost at once. He didn't know how to answer that. Euphemia saw the hesitation in him, but she didn't take the request back. Instead, she spoke more clearly. More directly. Suzaku Kururugi, she said, her voice quiet but firm now, please escort me there. That left him with no room to pretend he had misunderstood. Suzaku looked at her for another second, searching her face, trying to understand why she would ask for that place of all places. Then he let out a slow breath through his nose. All right, he said at last. And with that, the two of them turned toward Shinjuku. Lelouch sat down on one of the benches outside and unfolded the newspaper again, scanning the latest reports on Suzaku. He was looking for the official correction. For something clear. Something that would say Suzaku Kururugi had been released and cleared. But even as his eyes moved across the page, part of his mind was somewhere else entirely. On Madara. On the fox mask. On the way that blonde idiot had stepped into the middle of his plan and turned the entire night into something even more complicated than it already was. That mystery kept scratching at the back of his mind hard enough that he almost didn't notice Colin approaching until she spoke. Lelouch. He looked up. Colin stopped in front of him, arms folded lightly. Do you have a minute? Lelouch lowered the paper slightly. What is it? Colin's expression sharpened. About that phone call the other day. Lelouch blinked once. A phone call? Yeah, Colin said. You know. When you and I were in the bathroom. Lelouch kept his face calm. Colin watched him carefully. Can you find out what the caller ID was? She asked. I want to contact that person again. Lelouch glanced away for half a second, already thinking through the easiest answer. It was a school phone, he said. So I'm not sure something like that could be TRA. Then he stopped. His eyes shifted past Colin. And widened. Walking across the grounds in an Ashford uniform, as if she belonged there and had every right in the world to casually ruin his life, was CC. Lelouch's entire body went rigid. That girl, he muttered under his breath. Colin frowned. What? Is there something wrong? Lelouch moved on pure reflex. He grabbed Colin and pulled her down hard with him, dropping behind the bench in a clumsy tangle of limbs and panic before CC could look their way. The newspaper flew. Colin hit the grass first. Lelouch landed half on top of her. For one stunned second, neither of them said anything. Colin's face went bright red almost immediately. Excuse me, she snapped, glaring up at him. What are you doing? Lelouch, still trying to keep himself low enough not to be seen, finally looked down and seemed to realize how this looked. He said. Then, with all the dignity of someone who had absolutely none left. What indeed? After prying himself away from Colin and the disaster that had been that conversation after Colin punched him in the face calling him a perv then storming off, Lelouch caught up with CC. And dragged her with him all the way to the roof. The second they were alone, he let go of her arm and turned on her. Are you insane? He demanded. You can't just go walking around like that. CC looked completely unbothered. Don't act strict with me, she said. I never leave the school grounds, so it's fine. It's not fine, Lelouch snapped. You can't just do whatever you want here. You don't belong. CC didn't look offended. If anything, her expression went quieter for a second. I don't belong anywhere, she said. Then her attention shifted past him. She tilted her head slightly. What's with her? Lelouch glanced over and saw the girl again. She was at the same wall as before, marking it over and over with the same dull, repetitive focus that made the whole thing look unsettling if you watched for more than a few seconds. Lelouch let out a small breath through his nose. Oh, he said. She's doing it again today. CC looked back at him. Again. Lelouch folded his arms. She's going to keep marking that wall every day, he said, because I ordered her to. CC's eyes narrowed slightly. With your Geass. Lelouch looked at her. So that's what it's called, he said. When we first made contact, that name was there. His gaze shifted back toward the girl. Geass. CC watched the scene below for another moment. You're testing how long it lasts. I need to know the specifications of my weapon, don't I? Lelouch replied. How long commands remain in effect? What the limits are? What changes and what doesn't? Then his eyes sharpened. So behave yourself, he said. Or I'll test it on you. That got the faintest reaction out of her. Would it work on me? CC asked. Lelouch frowned slightly. CC looked away from the wall and back toward him, calm as ever. Oh, relax, she said. You and I are in this together now. I'm not going to do anything that puts either of us at risk. A breeze moved across the rooftop, stirring her green hair as she looked out over the school grounds below. Our partnership is too unique for that. Suzaku could only stare at what Shinjuku had become. He still didn't understand why Euphemia had insisted on coming here. He had warned her more than once that there was nothing for her to see but wreckage and grief, but she had come anyway. The Shinjuku ghetto, Suzaku said quietly. It was only just starting to recover. Now it had been crushed all over again. And all around them, Britannian students wandered through the destruction like tourists, talking too loudly, staring too freely, treating the scars of the district like something to be observed instead of mourned. Man, so they didn't use RG on the 11s. I figured they wouldn't. Hey, those are marks from Hummer rounds. Get a clear shot of it. Suzaku's jaw tightened. He didn't approve of the Japanese taking up violence against Britannia. But that did not mean he could stand there comfortably while Britannians turned Japanese suffering into spectacle. He couldn't stop them. Not as an honorary Britannian. Not without making everything worse. Still, the disgust only made his resolve harden further. Beside him, Euphemia had gone quiet too, her expression troubled as she looked over the wreckage. Unfortunately, not everyone there was willing to stay quiet. A small group of Japanese men had been watching the students from farther down the slope, and finally one of them, a loud, angry man with reddish-brown hair, stormed forward and knocked a camera straight out of a student's hands. Get out of here, you Britannian bastards. The students recoiled at once, too startled to do much besides stare. Suzaku saw exactly where this was going. And he moved before it could get there. He set his bags down and spoke quickly to Euphemia. Stay here. Then he ran uphill toward the shouting before fists could start flying. One of the students bristled immediately. How dare a lowly 11 speak to us like? Don't call me an 11. The man shouted back. I'm Japanese. Wrong, another student sneered. You people lost. You're nothing but beaten dogs. You racist pig. Stop. Suzaku shouted as he reached them. Please, no violence. He grabbed for the angry man first, trying to pull him back before the whole thing got worse. Stay out of this. The man snapped, swinging at him wildly. The blow missed Suzaku's face, but it knocked his sunglasses clean off. For one instant, the man froze. Then his eyes widened. You're Suzaku Kururugi. The guy who killed Clovis. No, idiot, one of the others said. Zero killed him. Suzaku looked away for half a second, a familiar bitterness settling in his chest. Even now, even after everything, there were still plenty of people willing to believe the worst of him. But the man in front of him was not done. TCH, he spat. This guy's just a slave. Big deal, you're an honorary Britannian. Nobody cares. You sold your pride, your people, your soul, and you still call yourself Japanese. Suzaku's brows drew together. No, he said quietly. You're wrong. I am not wrong, you stinking Britannian lapdog. The man lunged again, fist flying towards Suzaku's face. This time, Suzaku was ready. His feet planted firmly. His hand caught the man's wrist. His other hand seized the front of his shirt. And using the force of the attack against him, Suzaku turned and threw him hard onto his back in one smooth motion. The whole thing took less than a second. The other Japanese men stared. So did the Britannian students. Even Euphemia looked startled. The man on the ground let out a pained grunt, then scrambled back to his feet, furious and humiliated and ready to charge again. Suzaku raised his hands slightly, not in surrender, but in warning. Stop, he said. Please. I'm warning you, I've been trained in military combat. Don't make me fight my own people. The man glared at him with open hatred. Like hell were your people. Before anyone realized what was happening, Tamaki's arm was suddenly caught and twisted hard behind his back. He barely had time to yell before he was forced down onto one knee. Suzaku's eyes widened at the sight. The one holding him there was none other than his oldest friend, and he had a deep frown on his face as he looked down at the struggling resistance member. Suzaku froze. Naruto. That's enough, Naruto muttered. His eyes moved from Tamaki to the other two resistance members, sharp and unimpressed. What exactly did you think you were doing? He asked, though it was clear he wasn't asking any one person in particular. Then he let go of Tamaki's arm. Tamaki pulled back at once, clutching his shoulder and glaring. It's you, Uzumaki, Suzaku heard one of the students stammer from behind him, and that alone made him realize how tense the air had suddenly become. Naruto looked at the three men and raised a brow. Well, we were just on break, Tamaki said, rubbing his shoulder. Naruto's expression didn't change. According to Ogi, your break started 30 minutes ago, he said. That made Tamaki's face twist. And when I finally find you, Naruto continued, you're starting a fight. Well, these guys, Tamaki began. Naruto cut him off immediately. Are none of your concern. Now get back to the reconstruction site, Naruto said. Before I cut your pay for skipping work. Or just fire all of you from Namikaze Corporation entirely. His gaze shifted to the other two as he said it, making it very clear the warning applied to them as well. Tamaki looked outraged. You can't do that. Naruto gave him a flat look. If you'd actually read your contract, you'd know I can. Tamaki opened his mouth. Naruto didn't let him get far. If you do anything that makes Namikaze Corporation look bad, or if you act irresponsibly while you're on the clock, I have every right to dismiss you, he said. And if you don't believe me, ask Ogi. He's got extra contracts with him in case more people volunteer. He folded his arms. Like I said, the work is voluntary. I'm not forcing you to stay. His eyes narrowed slightly. But that doesn't mean I have to keep paying you if you turn out to be a lousy employee. Tamaki glared at him, furious, but Yoshida and Minami were already trying to pull him away before he made things worse. He let them. Barely. As the three of them turned to leave, Tamaki spat in Suzaku's direction on the way out. Naruto's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing until they were gone. Only then did he turn back. By now, Euphemia had moved closer, having come over while Naruto was dealing with Tamaki. Naruto looked between her and Suzaku, his expression easing just slightly. Are you two all right? He asked politely. We are fine, thank you, Yuffie replied with a polite little bow. And yourself? Oh, I'm Yuffie, by the way. Naruto smiled automatically. And for some reason, that only made the pink-haired girl blush harder. Suzaku, meanwhile, had already stepped closer, clearly still trying to process the fact that the blonde in front of him was not only here, but here in Shinjuku. Before Naruto could say anything back, the Kyuubi's voice slithered into his mind. Oh my, the fox mused lazily through their mental link. This girl's got quite the figure. Nice size too. They look soft. Naruto's eyes widened. For half a second, his brain just stopped. What the hell is wrong with you? Naruto shouted back internally, a small blush instantly creeping across his face. What kind of thing is that to say, you Kitasni? The Kyuubi sounded thoroughly amused. Relax, brat. It's an observation. That is not a normal observation. For you, maybe, the fox replied, sounding almost bored now. There's no reason to get embarrassed. Whatever, Naruto grumbled, which only got harder to sell as his face grew warmer. The QB, naturally, noticed immediately. Oh. It purred. And what if it were Colin instead? That did it. Naruto's face went red fast enough to be almost impressive. The name alone was enough to throw him completely off balance, and the fox knew it. You know, the QB went on, enjoying itself far too much. Colin's actually a little bigger than this one. Semicolon. Shut up. Naruto shot back at once, now completely flustered as the image of Colin forced its way into his head, the outfit from the first time he had really seen her, the one that left very little to the imagination while somehow making things worse the more he remembered it. The fox barked out a low, delighted laugh in the back of his mind. What is it with you Namikaze men and redheads? Naruto glared into absolutely nothing. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you don't, the QB replied, not believing him for a second. Outwardly, all Suzaku and Yuffie saw was Naruto standing there with a strange expression, his face a little redder than it had been a moment ago. Yuffie tilted her head slightly. Is something wrong? Naruto straightened almost too fast. No, he said, then immediately cleared his throat and tried again, much more carefully. No. I mean, yeah, I'm fine. Suzaku gave him a look that said he did not believe that for even a second. Naruto ignored him. Mostly because if he looked at Suzaku right now, he was pretty sure his oldest friend would somehow know exactly how bad his internal situation had just become. Well, I'm not. The sharp complaint cut through the moment and dragged Naruto out of his own head. He looked over and saw one of the Britannian students, the one with the bandana, holding up his busted camera with open anger on his face. Why did you just let them go like that, Uzumaki? The other student demanded. From all the rumors going around school, you should have been able to beat the crap out of those 11s. Naruto's expression flattened, the last of that earlier flush finally gone from his face as he turned fully toward the two of them. What I want to know, he said, voice calm but edged, is what you two are doing here. The boys blinked. Naruto gestured around them at the ruined district. This area may not be restricted, he went on, but civilians were already told reconstruction would be underway today. Which means unless you had a real reason to be here, you should have stayed out of the way. That's none of your business, Uzumaki, the student with the bandana snapped. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. If your being here causes trouble for Namikaze Corporation, he said, then it becomes my business. The two boys looked like they wanted to argue more, but instead they turned their attention back to Suzaku. And what about you? The second one said. Why didn't you do anything? Some honorary Britannian you are. The first one sneered. You should have killed them. What's a few dead 11s to someone like you? He jerked his chin toward Suzaku. Who do you think's been taking care of you all these years anyway? The crack of the slap rang out before anyone else could speak. Everyone froze. Yuffie stood there with her hands still half raised, glaring at the boy she had just hit across the face. I will not allow you to insult this man any longer, you oaf, she said, her voice shaking with anger. The boy stared at her in disbelief, one hand pressed to his cheek. Why you? I think, Naruto cut in, stepping forward just enough to put himself between them and Suzaku, that you two should leave. Now. Both students looked at him. Naruto met their eyes, and for just a second, something in the air changed. Unless, he said quietly, you want to find out for yourselves whether those rumors from school are true. A tiny amount of killing intent slipped out with the words. Enough to make both boys go pale. The second one was the first to break. Come on, man, he muttered quickly, tugging at his friend's sleeve. Let's just get out of here. This time, the other boy didn't argue. A second later, both of them were gone. Silence settled over the ruined street after that. Then, after a moment, Suzaku looked at Naruto. Naruto, he said, curiosity cutting through everything else for a second. Can I ask you something? Naruto glanced back at him. Sure. What are you doing here? Suzaku asked, still looking between Naruto and the ruined district around them. You mentioned reconstruction, but reconstruction of what? Naruto raised a brow at that. Can't you guess? Then a wide grin spread across his face and he threw his arms out toward the wreckage around them. Shinjuku, he said. I'm here to rebuild Shinjuku. Suzaku went still. For a second, he just stared at him. You're going to rebuild Shinjuku? Yep, Naruto said easily. And before you ask, no, I'm not turning it into some extension of the settlement. His grin softened a little as he glanced back over the broken streets. I want to restore it to what it was before the war. That answer only seemed to deepen Suzaku's confusion. Why? Naruto blinked. Why did this? Suzaku asked again. Why spend your time on this? Why use your father's resources for something most Britannians don't care about at all? He looked away for a second, then back. Not that I'm saying it's bad. I'm glad you are doing it. I just don't understand. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Then he looked out across the ruined skyline, expression turning more thoughtful than playful. Do I need a reason? He asked, almost to himself. A breeze moved through the wreckage. Naruto's voice dropped slightly. My dad told me once that the man that gave me my name wanted to see the world at peace. He kept his eyes on Shinjuku as he said it. So maybe I inherited that dream without meaning to. Then he looked back at Suzaku. I guess this is just my first step. Suzaku studied him for a second. Do you really think you can bring about peace? Naruto nodded once. Yeah, he said simply. But not by myself. And not anytime soon. A faint smile touched his mouth. I'm not arrogant enough to think I can fix everything overnight. Then he shrugged. Or stupid enough. For every person who agrees with me, there'll probably be 10 more who think I'm an idiot. That got the smallest reaction out of Suzaku. Then Yuffie, who had been listening quietly until now, tilted her head. So what will you do? Naruto looked at her, then back at the city. For peace to even have a chance, he said, the cycle of hatred has to be broken first. He folded his arms loosely. Or at least weakened. His gaze moved over the damaged buildings. The Namikaze Corporation already means something to the Japanese. Hope, maybe. Proof that even if things are terrible now, that doesn't mean they have to stay that way. Suzaku's eyes narrowed slightly, listening. Naruto continued. If I can help rebuild Shinjuku, he said, if I can give people back even a piece of the life they had before the war, then maybe some of that hatred starts to loosen. He looked back at Suzaku. Even a little would matter. Suzaku was quiet for a second, then said, that does sound like something you'd do. Naruto snorted softly. Glad somebody noticed. Then Suzaku added, more thoughtfully this time, still, it's different hearing it from you like this. You're the son of the man who runs the Namikaze Corporation. That made Yuffie blink. She turned fully toward Naruto, surprise plain on her face now. You are. Naruto looked caught off guard by how impressed she suddenly seemed. Yeah. Yuffie's eyes widened a little. Even back in the homeland, she said, people talk about the developments and advances Namikaze Corporation has made these last few years. Naruto immediately scratched the back of his head, suddenly looking far more awkward than he had a second ago. It's not that big a deal, he muttered. That, for some reason, only made Yuffie smile. There was something unexpectedly cute about the way he tried to brush it off, like he had no idea how unusual it was to hear someone speak about his family's name with that much admiration and not know what to do with it. Suzaku noticed the look on her face. Naruto, thankfully, did not. Or if he did, he was doing a very good job pretending otherwise. Naruto let his hand fall and looked back toward the ruins again. Anyway, he said, trying to sound a little more serious, talking about it doesn't matter much if I don't actually do it. Then he glanced between the two of them. So yeah. That's why I'm here. I don't know, Suzaku admitted after a moment. Sometimes peace feels like something from another world. His green eyes lowered briefly before he looked back at Naruto. When I was 10, the world already felt broken to me, he said quietly. Like it had already decided what kind of place it was going to be, and that place wasn't kind. A faint tension entered his voice then. A world without hope. Naruto stayed silent, letting him speak. Suzaku's hands tightened slowly at his sides. I still don't know if peace is really possible, he went on. And I don't know if I even have the right answer for how to reach it. He let out a breath through his nose. But I do know that if I stand still and do nothing, then more people are going to lose the ones they care about. His jaw clenched. I grew up with you. With Mito. I know what it's like to have people around you who matter. His eyes hardened slightly. I don't want anyone else to suffer the way we did. For a second, the only sound between them was the wind moving through the ruined district. Then Suzaku looked back toward the half-destroyed streets of Shinjuku. What you're trying to do is admirable, Naruto, he said. It really is. But like you said yourself, not everyone is going to agree with your methods. His gaze shifted back to Naruto. So I don't know if this is the answer either. Naruto didn't respond right away. Because Suzaku was right. Not everyone would agree. Not everyone could be reached by kindness, by rebuilding, by symbols of hope. Some people would reject all of that. Some people would have to be dragged forward another way. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly as the thought settled in. Not everyone will listen, he admitted to himself. And that was exactly why Madara existed. Lelouch sat at his desk, one hand resting against his chin as he stared at the screen in front of him, though his mind was already several steps ahead of what was written there. CC lay across his bed like she had every right to be there, a magazine in one hand, pizza in the other, listening with only half her attention as he spoke. To use my Geass, Lelouch said, I need direct eye contact with the target. Glasses don't interfere with it, so transparent surfaces don't seem to matter. Its effective range is around 270 meters. He paused only long enough to organize the next thought. And the target doesn't seem to remember anything before, during, or after the command is carried out. I think that's because the Geass interferes with the brain itself. His eyes narrowed slightly. And if it's an optical signal, then in theory, it should be possible to reflect it. CC lowered the magazine just enough to glance at him. You've learned a lot in a very short time. Lelouch didn't look at her. My enemy is an empire that controls more than a third of the world, he said. There's no such thing as being too careful. Far away from Ashford, Suzaku stood among the ruins of Shinjuku with Naruto and Euphemia, the wreckage of the district spread out around them in every direction. The conversation had gone quieter now. Less awkward. Less cautious. Not easy. Just honest. Euphemia watched the two boys as they spoke, hearing something deeper in the tone now than just argument or ideals. There was history there. Years of it. CC turned another page. I might understand this obsession if you were an 11, she said. But you're Britannian, aren't you? Your opponent is too large, too strong. Geass alone may not be enough. Lelouch finally looked at her then. Is it good to be strong? He asked. In Shinjuku, Suzaku's eyes shifted slightly, as if he had heard the shape of the question from somewhere else entirely. Is it bad to be weak? He answered quietly. Naruto looked at him. So did Euphemia. Suzaku's gaze lowered to the broken street beneath their feet. The wind moved softly through the ruined district. A place without any hope. Lelouch's voice came again, cold and measured in the quiet of his room. Starvation. Suzaku's followed in Shinjuku. Disease. Filth. Decay. Racism. Constant war. Terrorism. Living in a never-ending cycle of hate. Lelouch leaned back slightly in his chair, eyes half-lidded now. Rats running in a wheel. Suzaku's hands tightened at his sides. The cycle has to be broken, he said. Somebody has to do it. CC gave a faint, almost dismissive look. How idealistic. Euphemia, by contrast, looked at Suzaku with quiet attention. She wasn't smiling now. She was listening. Of course, Suzaku went on, I don't know if the person who does it can really make all the bad things disappear. Back in his room, Lelouch's eyes lowered again. I'm not that arrogant, he said. In Shinjuku, Naruto was quiet, but his expression had shifted. Suzaku looked out over the district. I just know that no one should keep losing the people they love. That line hung there for a second. Then, more quietly. At the very least, there should be a world without war. CC rested her chin on one hand. And to create this utopia, she asked, you would what? At almost the same moment, Euphemia asked, with none of CC's irony in her voice. How would you do it? Lelouch's answer came first. It's simple. Once someone wins, the fighting ends. CC raised a brow. Someone. Suzaku let out a slow breath through his nose. I don't know how Naruto would do it, he said honestly. I don't even know if I agree with all of it. Naruto glanced at him. But if I stop trying, Suzaku continued, then my father's death really will have meant nothing. Euphemia blinked, surprised. The Prime Minister's death. Suzaku nodded once. My father died in that war. The words were simple. He was quiet for a second before continuing. Afterward, his gaze shifted, not quite to Naruto, but close enough. I stayed with the Namikaze family for a while. That made Euphemia look between the two of them with new understanding. So that was part of it. Why the tone between them sometimes sounded like argument and sometimes sounded like something much older. Naruto said nothing. But he remembered it clearly. The silence after Genbu Kururugi's death. The way Suzaku had looked when he first came to stay with them. Like grief had already hardened into something he didn't know how to set down. Naruto looked away toward the ruined skyline. And in that moment, he found himself thinking almost exactly what Lelouch had, miles away. Not everyone will agree. Not with him. Not with Suzaku. Not with Zero. 3 people. 3 ideas of what saving this place might mean. And none of them would walk the same path to get there. Euphemia's voice softened. You cared about him very much. Suzaku didn't answer that directly. Instead he said, I couldn't protect him. I couldn't protect a lot of people. His jaw tightened. So if I can still do something now, if I can keep anyone else from going through that. He let the thought trail off. Naruto looked at him for a long moment. Then, finally, he spoke. You really haven't changed, he said. Suzaku looked back at him. Naruto's mouth twitched faintly, though there wasn't much humor in it. You still carry everything like it's yours alone. Suzaku almost smiled. Coming from you, that means absolutely nothing. Euphemia looked between the two of them, hearing it now more clearly. The familiarity. The old friction. The understanding underneath it. They weren't just 2 boys standing in a ruined district talking about peace. They were 2 people who had grown up close enough to know exactly where the other one's convictions came from, and exactly how dangerous those convictions could become. Back at Ashford, CC studied Lelouch in silence for a few seconds. Then she smiled faintly. So, she said, you intend to become the one who wins. Lelouch's expression did not change. But his eyes did. Yes, he said. In Shinjuku, Naruto looked out over the remains of the city, then down at his own hand for a second before curling it shut. Not everyone would agree. He already knew that. But that was exactly why he couldn't stop now. A sudden explosion rolled across the distance, sharp enough to make all 3 of them turn at once. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Suzaku stiffened. Yuffie flinched at the sound as a military truck came racing up the street and skidded to a stop near them. The passenger door flew open. Suzaku. Cecile called. Suzaku blinked. Miss Cecile. It's dangerous here, Cecile said quickly. Get in. Lloyd leaned out from the other side, looking far too casual for the situation. The purebloods are having a silly little squabble, he said. Best to leave before it gets even more ridiculous. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, though what a shame about your acquittal. Since now you'll have to work for me again. Suzaku took a step toward the truck, then stopped. Wait, he said. Isn't this a chance to gather battle data for the Lancelot? Cecile blinked. Ah. Lloyd's eyes lit up immediately. Oh ho. Yuffie turned towards Suzaku, worry plain on her face. Suzaku. Suzaku looked at her, then back toward the direction of the explosion. I'm sorry, Yuffie, he said quietly. We have to say goodbye here. His voice hardened. I need to do this. If I can stop them with the Lancelot, then I have to try. He clenched his hands slightly at his sides. I must. Naruto said nothing at first. He just watched as Suzaku climbed into the truck, the pieces settling into place in his mind one after another. So the pilot of the White Nightmare is Suzaku. He made things a lot more complicated. 0. Suzaku himself. 3 people chasing something that sounded almost the same when spoken out loud. Change, peace, protection. And yet the roads they were choosing were drifting farther apart every time they crossed. Naruto's expression darkened slightly. At this rate, he thought, we might end up being each other's worst enemies. The truck roared off. And moments later, the Lancelot launched. Naruto watched the White Nightmare blast into the distance toward the fighting, impossibly fast, a streak of white cutting across the darkening sky. Then Yuffie spoke. Naruto. He looked down at her. She lowered her gaze slightly, then gave him a small bow. I'm sorry, she said. But I have to do my part too. I can't just stand by while this keeps happening. Before he could answer, she turned and ran in the same direction Suzaku had gone. Naruto stared after her for half a second. Then his Sharingan spun to life. Red swallowed blue in an instant. Damn it, he muttered. And then he moved. He took off at once, easily outpacing Euphemia as he leapt across rooftops and broken walls, the wind tearing past him as he followed the path of the Lancelot. By the time he reached the arena where the purebloods had turned their conflict into open battle, Naruto had already slipped back into the shadows. Jeremiah growled inside the cockpit of his battered Sutherland. He had come out here hunting Zero. Instead, he had walked straight into an ambush laid by his own countrymen. One of the attacking nightmares was already down. Another was barely holding together. But the other 2 were still in fighting condition, and Jeremiah's own machine had taken enough damage that every movement now felt heavier than it should have. This is Gottwald. Jeremiah barked over the channel. All of you, stand down. Whoever is behind this insubordination, show yourself. A voice answered him at once. Who else but a true Britannian? Jeremiah's face twisted. Kuel, he snarled. Jeremiah, Kuel continued, you are going to pay for letting Prince Clovis's murderer go free. Kuel, you bastard. Jeremiah shouted back. There was no sign of Zero here. You fed me that story just to lure me out. Your cowardice will not stand, Kuel replied. We will wipe away this stain before Princess Cornelia takes up her post. We will be pure once more. Jeremiah's grip tightened on the controls. I am no coward. You surround me with tricks and lies, and you call this honest combat. More lies, Kuel said. All hail Britannia. Then they charged. Kuel and the 2 remaining nightmares rushed him in a tight Y formation, their lances lowered and ready to skewer him where he stood. Jeremiah's eyes narrowed. He had endured the whispers. The accusations. The humiliation of being called traitor. Orange. He had endured all of it. But he was not about to let these fools murder him. He moved at the last possible moment. His Sutherland twisted hard, slipping past 2 of the incoming lances, and Jeremiah slammed his left stun tonfa into the already damaged nightmare. The strike hit hard enough to cripple it completely, forcing the pilot to eject. But the opening cost him. The 3rd lance drove clean through his Sutherland's right arm. Jeremiah cursed and detached the ruined limb immediately before the damage could spread and detonate the whole machine. That left him with almost nothing. One arm gone. Armor failing. And barely enough room to breathe before Kuel came at him again. Don't worry, Jeremiah, Kuel said coldly. Your family name will not be disgraced by this. We'll simply tell the princess you fell in battle. His lance lowered. Now die. Before the strike could land, something shot across the arena and slammed into the space between them. A slash hearken. Kuel jerked back. So did Jeremiah. All 3 pilots turned just in time to see the White Nightmare retract its wire. The white machine stepped forward, bright even in the ruined light of the arena. Stop. Suzaku's voice rang out from inside the cockpit. You're all Britannian soldiers. There's no need for this senseless fighting. The Special Corps should stay out of this. Kuel shouted back. Any interloper dies along with Orange. No, Suzaku said. I won't allow it. The Lancelot drew its maser vibration swords. Kuel answered with violence. His slash harkens fired first, but the Lancelot's blades beat them aside almost effortlessly. Then he lunged in with his lance, only for Suzaku to slice straight through that too, leaving Kyul suddenly weaponless and very aware of it. Jeremiah stared. Kururugi. The same 11 he had accused. The same one he had all but condemned. And now he was the reason Jeremiah was still alive. Before that thought could settle, the last remaining pureblood nightmare charged. Its lance came straight at Jeremiah. He saw it. He knew he could not avoid it. Not with the shape his Sutherland was in. For a single frozen second, Jeremiah understood with perfect clarity that this was how he died. My lady, forgive me. I failed to protect you. I failed to protect your children. Then another nightmare crashed into the attacker from the side and knocked it off course. The pilot ejected. The new machine landed between Jeremiah and death. Valletta. Jeremiah shouted. Lord Jeremiah, Valletta answered over the speakers. For the first time since the ambush began, Jeremiah allowed himself the smallest breath. Valletta. You have my thanks. She gave a short nod, then looked toward the Lancelot. Isn't that? I know who is piloting it, Jeremiah said, a bitter little smirk pulling at his mouth. There was irony enough in this night already. Being saved by Kururugi was only one more insult added to the pile. Kyul, meanwhile, knew exactly what this looked like. His squad was shattered. Jeremiah still lived. And now he was facing not only Valletta Nu, but the Lancelot as well. There was no winning this. But he was too far gone to stop. Jeremiah, Kyul called, voice shaking with fury, this is not the end. A hatch on the side of his nightmare opened. A cylinder dropped free. Jeremiah's eyes widened. A chaos mine. No. Valletta shouted. Stop. Suzaku yelled. Then another voice cut across the arena. What? Suzaku recognized it instantly. Yuffie. He turned in horror. She was running straight into the combat zone. Princess Euphemia. Jeremiah breathed, the shock hitting him almost harder than the mine. What is she doing here? Kyul did not hesitate. Now die, orange scum. Jeremiah drove his damaged Sutherland forward with everything it had left, but he already knew it would not be enough. His machine was too damaged. Too slow. Suzaku did not waste even that much time thinking. The Lancelot crossed its arms and activated the blaze luminous shielding just as the chaos mine detonated. Light and shrapnel exploded outward in a violent wave. The shield caught it. Held. Barely. Inside the cockpit, Suzaku gritted his teeth as the force hammered against the Lancelot's defenses. The blaze luminous held the blast back, but he could see the energy reserves dropping fast. Too fast. If the mine kept up for even a few seconds longer, the shield would fail. And if it failed, everyone here would die. While Suzaku held the blast, Jeremiah finally reached Euphemia. With his one working arm, he seized her and turned his crippled Sutherland so that whatever debris got through would hit him before it hit her. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the mine burned itself out. The arena fell quiet except for the crackle of smoke and ruined metal. Lord Jeremiah! Valletta shouted. Jeremiah checked his systems once, then looked down at the girl in his grasp. I'm all right, Valletta. Euphemia looked up at him, unharmed. And smiling. Please, Sir Knight, she said, put me down. Jeremiah did. The moment her feet touched the ground, Euphemia stepped forward into the center of the arena where everyone could see her. Her voice carried cleanly. I am Euphemia Lee Britannia of the Holy Britannian Empire, she declared. And the third princess of the imperial family. The whole arena seemed to stop breathing. I am taking command here. All forces, fall back at once. Suzaku stared at her. Yuffie. From the shadows off to one side, Naruto let out a low whistle beneath his breath. Oh, wow, he murmured. Third princess. Didn't see that coming. The QB's voice rumbled through their link a second later. And what surprises me, the fox said, is that you didn't jump in the second she was in danger. Naruto's gaze stayed fixed on the arena below. There wasn't any point. The QB growled softly. Naruto went on anyway. Suzaku had already moved to protect her, he said. If Madara showed up then, it wouldn't have meant anything except drawing more attention. His Sharingan caught the look on Euphemia's face before anyone else seemed to. Sadness. Relief. Something more complicated than either. And if Madara appeared right next to a Britannian princess in the middle of that chaos, it could have made things worse. A masked enigma who's already torn apart military nightmares doesn't exactly make people feel safe. The fox was quiet for a second. Then, I suppose. Naruto let the silence sit for a beat longer before stepping back. Then he turned and disappeared into the dark before anyone in the arena had the chance to notice him. Cecile looked from the monitors to Lloyd, still sounding a little stunned by how quickly the entire situation had turned. You knew it was her, Lloyd. Lloyd gave an easy nod. Uh-huh. But she's been a student up until now and hasn't made her public debut yet. That explained the shock still rippling through the pureblood faction. Kuehl, pale now in a way he hadn't been even during the fight, lowered his head first. We are truly. The others followed immediately. We are truly sorry, Your Highness. Suzaku barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on Euphemia. On the name she had just spoken aloud. On the title that suddenly made everything about her fall into place all at once. The pink hair. The kindness. The ease with which she had moved through a world of rank without ever seeming proud of it. And then, with one sharp thought, something else clicked. Lelouch. His face. Nunnally. The way they had both spoken of the royal family without ever speaking like outsiders. Suzaku's eyes widened slightly. She's Lelouch's sister. Which meant the gentle girl who had wandered the city with him, smiled at cats, and asked to see Shinjuku with her own eyes, was a Britannian princess. And somehow, impossibly, also part of Lelouch's family. For one brief second, another red-haired face crossed his mind too. Mito. How she would probably stare at him, stare at Euphemia, and then immediately start demanding why no one had said anything sooner. The thought almost made him smile. Instead, Suzaku stepped forward and bowed his head at once. My lady. Euphemia turned toward him. Ah. Suzaku lowered himself further, shame tightening in his chest. I had no idea who you were, he said. Please forgive me, princess. Euphemia looked at him for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice had none of the distance he expected from royalty. Suzaku, she said softly, you and I both carry deep pain. That made him look up. You lost your father, she continued. Just as I lost my brother. Suzaku's breath caught. Ah. The arena had gone quiet around them now, but for Suzaku, it felt quieter still. Because she wasn't speaking to him like a princess offering pity to a soldier. She was speaking like someone who understood loss when it was still fresh enough to hurt. Euphemia stepped closer. So, she said, will you let me help you? Suzaku blinked. In your wish, she went on, to create a world where no one ever again has to suffer the loss of a loved one on the battlefield. For a second, he could only stare at her. Then his head bowed again, though this time not from shame. Yes, he said quietly. I am unworthy of your kindness. Euphemia's expression softened. I heard what you did today, Euphemia. You shouldn't be so reckless. Euphemia looked up as her older sister came to a stop in front of her, flanked by a line of assembled officers and attendants waiting to receive her. For a moment, Euphemia said nothing. Then she lowered her head slightly. I know, sister. Forgive me, but you will address me as Viceroy, Sub-Viceroy Euphemia, the woman cut in at once. Cold enough to make the men standing nearby straighten even further. Because we are sisters, Cornelia continued, we must follow proper protocol. Euphemia nodded immediately. Yes, I understand. For just a second, as the words left her mouth, her thoughts flickered elsewhere, to Suzaku. And, strangely enough, to Naruto too. To the easy smile he wore even in the middle of ruins. To the way he had stepped in without hesitation. To the way he had spoken about rebuilding Shinjuku like it was the most natural thing in the world to try and give broken people something back. Then Cornelia spoke again, and the thought was gone as quickly as it had come. Now then. Cornelia turned her head slightly toward the man standing beside her. Vice Minister, she said. Give me your report. Yes, my lady, the man replied, snapping into a salute. The first order of business is a welcome feast in your honor, followed by a formal address. He got no further. In one smooth motion, Cornelia drew her gun and pressed it against his forehead. Euphemia gasped. The entire line of men froze. Cornelia's face did not change. Sloppy, she said. Her voice was quiet. That only made it worse. Senile. Corrupt. Every word landed like a strike. Where is Zero? No one answered. No one dared. Cornelia's eyes hardened. I want the enemy of the Empire caught. The gun did not move. Get Zero. And just like that, Euphemia understood that Cornelia Lee Britannia had arrived in Area 11 and she had not come for ceremony. She had come for blood. When Lelouch sat down in class that morning, he expected the day to be simple. Sit through the lecture. Ignore rivals. Avoid Millie if possible. Get through school and spend the rest of the afternoon figuring out what his next move needed to be. Naruto, sitting a few seats away, clearly expected the same thing. He looked half awake already, one arm draped over the desk and his attention somewhere between the front of the room and the window. So when the teacher announced they would be having a new student, neither of them paid much attention at first. Then the classroom door opened. And both boys looked up. Lelouch went completely still. Naruto straightened so fast his chair scraped. For one stunned second, neither of them seemed able to believe what they were seeing. Standing at the front of the class in an Ashford Academy uniform, alive, upright, and somehow here, was Suzaku Kururugi. Lelouch's eyes widened. Naruto actually blinked twice like that would somehow change what he was looking at. Why is Suzaku here? Suzaku had survived Shinjuku. Then he had been accused of killing Clovis. Then he had disappeared into military custody. And now he was standing in their classroom like he belonged there. The room around them broke into whispers almost immediately. That's the 11 who killed Prince Clovis. No, idiot. Zero killed Clovis. Then why's an 11 here? What is he doing at Ashford? Naruto's jaw tightened at that, but he said nothing. Lelouch didn't either. Neither of them took their eyes off Suzaku. Because shock was still winning over everything else. The rest of the day dragged. Every whisper grated. Every side glance toward Suzaku got harder to ignore. Naruto spent most of the lesson pretending to look normal while very clearly not looking normal at all, and Lelouch did his best to sit still and think through what this meant. Suzaku, for his part, endured it in silence. By the time class finally ended, Lelouch was done waiting. When he was sure Suzaku was looking his way, he adjusted the collar of his shirt in the old signal they had used years ago. Naruto noticed it too. His eyes narrowed slightly. You've got to be kidding me, he thought. Then Lelouch turned and walked out. Hopefully he remembers, Lelouch thought. He did. A few minutes later, Lelouch was standing on the roof when the door opened behind him. 7 years, Lelouch said, turning as Suzaku stepped out into the open air. 7 years since we used that signal. A small, faint smile touched his mouth. Long time, huh? Suzaku walked over and leaned against the railing. Meeting on the roof, he said. Just like the old days. For the first time since he'd walked into the classroom, something in his face softened. I'm glad to see you okay. Lelouch let out a quiet breath. Alive and kicking, he said. Thanks to you. He studied Suzaku for a second. You haven't changed much. Still worrying about me when you're the one who took a bullet. His tone sharpened just a little. Try worrying about yourself for once. Suzaku gave the faintest huff through his nose. Just repaying the favor you did for me 7 years ago. His expression shifted then. What about the girl from the capsule? What happened to her? Lelouch's smile thinned. I don't really know. We got separated pretty quickly. That part, at least, came out smoothly enough. But you would know more than I would, right? Suzaku shook his head. No. The only people who knew anything were the Royal Guard. Lelouch said nothing, but a small part of him relaxed anyway. Good. That meant CC was still a secret. For now. Then Suzaku looked at him again. What about you? He asked. Do I still call you Lelouch, or do you go by something else these days? That was when Naruto stepped out from behind the stairwell door, arms folded, expression caught somewhere between relief and disbelief. Oh, so that's when I'm allowed in on this? He asked. Suzaku turned sharply. Naruto. Before he could finish, the rooftop door slammed open again. Mito came flying through it. For one brief second, Suzaku just stared. Then Mito crossed the distance between them in a rush and threw her arms around him hard enough to nearly knock him back a step. Suzaku blinked in shock. Mito. You idiot. She snapped, voice tight with emotion. Do you have any idea how worried we were? Then she pulled back just far enough, and punched him square in the face. Not hard enough to really hurt him. Hard enough to make her point. Suzaku stumbled back, one hand going to his cheek while Naruto actually winced in sympathy. Ow, Naruto muttered. Mito was red-faced now, somewhere between furious and relieved. You disappear, get arrested for killing a prince, vanish into military custody, and then just show up at school like none of that happened. Suzaku stared at her. Then, despite everything, the corner of his mouth twitched. Yeah, Naruto said from off to the side, I'm with her on that one. Lelouch, meanwhile, watched all of this with the sort of expression that suggested this reunion had gone slightly off script. Only slightly. Suzaku lowered his hand from his cheek and looked between the three of them. For the first time since Shinjuku, he looked almost properly caught off guard. Naruto shook his head. You were insanely lucky she only hit you once. Mito shot him a look. I can do it again, only this time I'll hit you. I believe you. That finally got the smallest laugh out of Suzaku. Then the moment eased just enough for Lelouch to answer the question Suzaku had actually asked. Officially, he said, Lelouch v Britannia and his sister died during the invasion. Suzaku's expression sobered immediately. I go by Lelouch Lamperouge now. Suzaku nodded once, taking that in. Then Lelouch looked back at him. What happened at your court-martial? He asked. And why are you enrolled here? Suzaku was quiet for a second. That's the strange part, he admitted. Someone arranged for a proper investigation. Then decided a 17-year-old should be in school instead of drifting around after a military trial. Naruto's eyes narrowed immediately. A pink-haired girl flashed through his mind. Kind voice. Strange timing. Too much influence for someone who acted too innocent not to have it. It was her, he muttered. Suzaku looked at him. What? Naruto shrugged one shoulder. The girl, he said. Pink hair. Called herself Yuffie. That got Suzaku's full attention. Lelouch's too. Naruto went on. I'm guessing she had something to do with it. Suzaku didn't answer right away. Which, to Naruto, was answer enough. Mito looked between them all, picking up on the shift instantly. Who exactly is Yuffie? Suzaku gulped slowly knowing he was in danger for some reason noticing that Naruto left leaving him to the wrath of an angry 15-year-old girl. When Naruto came back to class, he barely had time to sit down before rivals made a beeline for him with Shirley, Nina, and Colin nearby. Hey, Naruto, rivals said as he walked up. How do you know the new guy? Naruto looked up at him, then glanced past the others toward where Suzaku was settling into his seat. He's an old friend, Naruto said simply. I ran into him yesterday near the reconstruction site. That answer got their attention immediately. An old friend, Shirley repeated. Naruto nodded once. Yeah. Nina looked uncertain, still a little nervous even bringing him up. So, what do you think about him? I mean, the transfer student. Do you think he's dangerous? Naruto blinked at that, then leaned back in his chair and thought about it for a second. Dangerous. He repeated. No, not really. His expression softened a little. He's the kind of guy who puts other people ahead of himself, even when it means he's the one who gets hurt. Nina looked down at her hands. Naruto noticed and shifted his attention fully to her. Don't let what other people are saying get to you, he said. I get that he might seem a little intimidating right now, and I'm not saying you have to trust him right away, but at least get to know him before you decide what kind of person he is. Nina gave a small, uncertain nod. I'll try. It's just. Like I said, Naruto replied, don't force it. Just give him a chance. Then, just like that, his mood shifted again. So, he said, looking between all of them with a grin, what did I miss yesterday? Rivals lit up immediately. Oh, nothing much, he said, already grinning back. Just Colin punching Lelouch. Naruto laughed. Seriously. Then he looked at Colin, whose face was already starting to color. Wish I'd been there to see that, he said, clearly amused. So what, was there a reason, or did you just decide he had it coming? Colin immediately tensed. Well, According to Shirley, Rivals cut in, completely unconcerned with the danger to his own life. It looked like Lelouch was trying to kiss her. Shirley made a scandalized sound at once. Rivals. But the damage was already done. Naruto's grin disappeared. The change was instant enough that everyone noticed it. He looked directly at Colin now, expression suddenly serious in a way that made even Rivals stop smiling. He didn't do anything to you, did he? Colin stared at him. So did everyone else. The question had come out sharp. Protective. Almost too quick, like Naruto hadn't even thought before asking it. Colin could only blink at him for a second before answering. No, she said. Nothing happened. The tension left Naruto just as quickly as it had come. Good, he said, his expression easing as warmth returned to his face. That only made Colin more aware of the fact that he had gone from joking to serious in half a breath. And for some reason, that unsettled her more than the joke had. Before anyone could say anything else, the warning bell rang. Students started making their way back to their seats, and a moment later Lelouch returned to the classroom with Suzaku following not long after him, both arriving just before the teacher stepped in. The rest of the day passed normally enough. At least on the surface. But every now and then, Colin found herself glancing toward Naruto, still wondering why he had looked at her like that, like the answer actually mattered to him. Over the next few days, Naruto had to sit there and watch as some of the Britannian students found little ways to needle Suzaku whenever teachers weren't looking. It was never anything huge on its own. A shoulder check in the hall. A desk moved out of place. Books knocked down. A muttered comment just loud enough to hear. The kind of harassment meant to wear a person down little by little while still giving everyone involved room to act innocent if they were called on it. Naruto hated it. More than once, he tried to get Suzaku to push back. More than once, Suzaku just brushed it off like it didn't matter. And both of them knew going to the teachers would change absolutely nothing. That didn't mean Naruto was willing to sit back and do nothing. If Suzaku wasn't going to retaliate, then Naruto would. Not directly. Not in any way that could be traced back to him. But over the next few days, more than one student who thought harassing Suzaku was funny ended up getting humiliated in ways they definitely did not enjoy. Shoes went missing. Uniform jackets got glued to chairs. One guy opened his locker and got a face full of flour. Another spent an entire lunch period walking around with, "I love home EC," written across the back of his shirt and had no idea how it got there. And every single time something happened, Suzaku had a perfectly solid alibi. By the end of it, most of the school still kept their distance from Suzaku, but the harassment slowed. Even Nina had shifted from outright fear to something closer to cautious unease. School ended for the day, and what remained now were club activities. Naruto and Colin were walking toward the student council clubroom together, talking idly about nothing important. Just normal things. School. Teachers. Millie's latest nonsense. Every now and then, Colin found herself glancing at him from the corner of her eye. And every time she did, she hated how natural walking with him was starting to feel. Then the PA system crackled to life. Millie's voice burst through the campus speakers with her usual overwhelming enthusiasm. "This is Millie Ashford, your student council president. Cat hunt, everybody. There's a cat loose on campus that needs to be rounded up, so put everything on hold. Participating clubs get budget priority, and whoever catches our feline friend will get an extra special prize, a big old kiss from one of the members of the council." She ended with a laugh that sounded just unhinged enough to be genuine. Naruto slowly looked at Colin. "Members of the council," Colin finished, already realizing where this was going. "Like us." They said the last part at the same time. And right on cue, students exploded out from behind nearby bushes and trees like they had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Exactly!" they shouted. In seconds, the crowd was already arguing over details that absolutely should not have been the first thing on their minds. "Do you think it counts if Naruto catches it?" What if Colin catches it? Would we get to pick who gives the kiss? Could it be on the lips? Naruto went still. Colin went pale. Then the mob took off across the grounds in a frenzy, all of them suddenly very motivated to find one specific cat. Hell no. Naruto shouted, loud enough to make Colin jump. There is no way I'm letting my first kiss get stolen like that. And with that, he bolted. Colin was left standing there for half a second, staring after him in mild disbelief. Then her face went red. Because now two things hit her at once. 1. Naruto had just admitted that was still his first kiss. And 2. There were now what felt like hundreds of people running around campus who might decide hers was fair game too. Absolutely not, Colin muttered. Her eyes narrowed. There is no way that's how I'm losing my first kiss. And without another thought, sickly, fragile schoolgirl act forgotten completely, Colin took off after the hunt too. Mito's face paled the second Millie's voice came over the PA. Participating clubs get budget priority, and whoever catches our feline friend will get an extra special prize, a big old kiss from one of the members of the council. Mito stopped dead for half a second. Then groaned and broke into a run. Damn it, she muttered under her breath, already scanning the grounds. I seriously don't know who's worse with pranks right now. Millie or Naruto. The whole campus had descended into chaos almost instantly. Students were shouting, running, arguing over who they wanted to catch the cat and, more importantly, who they wanted their reward from. Mito clicked her tongue in annoyance as she moved around the side of one of the school buildings, eyes sharp. Out of everyone on campus, she knew she and Naruto probably had the best chance of catching the cat without much trouble at all. If they used chakra, this would be over in seconds. That was exactly the problem. Because if she was the one who caught it, who exactly was she supposed to kiss? Mito's pace faltered for the smallest second as a very unhelpful thought crossed her mind. Suzaku. Her face immediately grew warmer. Then she shook her head hard like that alone would throw the thought out. Don't think about that right now, she told herself firmly. Absolutely not. Not now. Not while half the school was losing its mind over a cat. Mito let out a breath through her nose and kept moving, red hair swaying behind her as she searched the campus with growing determination. Because embarrassing thoughts or not, there was no way she was letting Millie decide her fate. Naruto had been searching all over campus for the cat by the time Millie added one more detail over the PA, whatever the animal was carrying needed to be brought back too. Naruto slowed for half a second and looked up at the speakers. Whatever that cat's holding better be worth it, he muttered. For one brief, dangerous moment, he considered making an army of shadow clones and ending the whole thing in under a minute. Then he decided that might be slightly excessive. Slightly. So instead he settled for 2 clones. The second they split off, Naruto took off again, scanning rooftops, windows, bushes, and the tops of walls for any sign of the cat. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a horrible realization hit him. Dad told me genin teams used to get sent after cats fresh out of the academy. Naruto nearly stopped running. His eye twitched. Then he saw it. A flash of purple fur. The cat was limping slightly as it disappeared around the corner of one of the school buildings and headed straight toward what Naruto knew was a dead end. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This really better be worth it, he muttered again, and hurried after it. When he turned the corner, he found the cat exactly where he expected it to be, boxed in, with nowhere left to run. But the second Naruto got a good look at it, he stopped. Number way. Sitting on top of the cat's head, crooked and ridiculous and somehow still unmistakable, was Zero's mask. Naruto stared. Is that actually Zero's mask? He recognized it immediately, from the bridge, from the posters now plastered all over the school, from the general insanity that seemed to follow Lelouch lately like a curse. Naruto's mouth twitched. Well, he thought dryly, if I somehow still had doubts about Lelouch being Zero, I guess that's over now. He took one slow, careful step forward so he wouldn't spook the animal. Then a chill ran down his spine. Naruto froze. Slowly, very slowly he turned his head to the right. And immediately regretted it. A group of girls stood there, at least a dozen of them, all wearing Ashford uniforms under an alarming amount of Naruto-themed fan gear. Headbands, shirts, little flags, banners. The whole thing looked less like a school crowd and more like a coordinated ambush. The expressions on their faces made it worse. Way worse. Predatory. Naruto swallowed once. Oh, he said weakly, lifting one hand in a nervous little wave. Hey, girls. I'm guessing you're here for the cat too. No, one of them said flatly. Naruto had no idea which one. Another girl smiled in a way that made him want to run immediately. Why should one of us settle for one kiss? She asked, when we could all get as many as we want if we catch you instead. A third girl lifted one of the little Naruto flags like she was declaring war. So while the rest of the school is on a cat hunt, her smile widened. We're on a fox hunt. Naruto took one step back. As one, the entire group stepped forward. He took two more. They matched him perfectly. At that point, Naruto decided there was no possible version of this conversation that ended well. Nope, he said. Then he turned and bolted. The girls screamed excitedly and took off after him without hesitation, completely abandoning the cat in favor of a much more personal target. The purple cat watched them go. Then, after the chaos had passed, it calmly padded out of the dead end, paused just long enough to scratch uselessly at the zero mask stuck on its head, and ran off in the opposite direction. While searching the grounds, Colin ended up running into Shirley. After one look at each other, and one very quick, very awkward exchange, they both realized they had the exact same problem. Neither of them wanted to catch the cat only to end up being forced into kissing someone because of Millie's insanity. So they teamed up. A few minutes later, the two girls had managed to corner the cat beneath a table near one of the staircases. Neither of them had gotten a proper look at it yet, but both had the same determined look in their eyes. All right, Colin said, keeping her voice low as she crouched slightly. If we do this right, our lips survive. Shirley, standing just beside her, nodded quickly. Colin pointed toward the far side of the table. Shirley, cover the back. Just as Colin started to move forward, Shirley suddenly spoke up. Wait a second. Colin stopped and glanced back at her. What now? Shirley looked strangely nervous all of a sudden. Then, a little too casually, if you did have to kiss someone, who would you want it to be? Colin blinked. Shirley pressed on, a little more hesitant now. I mean, is there anyone in particular? The question hit harder than it should have. Before Colin could stop it, an image of Naruto flashed through her mind. Then, much to her horror, it was followed immediately by the memory of how he looked after he came to check on her when she was in the shower. Her face went red so fast it was ridiculous. Shirley saw it instantly. And, naturally, misunderstood everything. It wouldn't be Lulu, would it? Shirley asked, eyes widening. Colin snapped toward her at once. What? She demanded. Why would you even think that? Shirley recoiled slightly. Well, because you're blushing. That means nothing. Shirley looked deeply unconvinced. Colin's face only got hotter. If that was what I wanted, she said, pointing sharply, I would not have punched him a few days ago. That made Shirley go bright red too as she remembered exactly what Colin was talking about. Well, I didn't mean. Unfortunately, while the two of them were busy arguing, neither noticed the purple-furred cat calmly slip out from under the table behind them. It padded away without the slightest hurry. By the time Colin and Shirley finally turned back, the space beneath the table was empty. There was a beat of silence. Then both girls froze. It's gone, Shirley said. Colin stared. Then both of them immediately started looking around in a panic. Minato was deep in one of the private labs when the door slid open behind him. Kushina stepped inside and stopped just past the threshold, her eyes moving over the equipment lit by cold white light. What are you working on? She asked, her voice quieter than usual as she looked back at her husband. Minato glanced over his shoulder at her. Then he looked toward the table beside him. That was when Kushina saw it. A core luminous sat at the center of the workbench, connected to a cluster of monitors and seal-lined interface panels. Streams of shifting data ran across the screens in steady waves, but even without reading all of it, she could tell this was no ordinary test. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Minato. He turned fully then, calm as ever, though she knew him well enough to see the determination beneath it. I've already accepted that neither of us is going to change Naruto's mind, he said. Kushina let out a quiet breath through her nose. She couldn't argue with that. So, Minato continued, I contacted someone I have a connection with and had them begin work on a nightmare designed specifically for him. That got her full attention. A nightmare. Minato nodded once. One built to match the way Naruto actually fights, he said. More importantly, one that can interface with his chakra instead of forcing him to work around a system never meant for him. Kushina stepped closer to the table, her gaze dropping back to the core luminous. And then she saw what was wrong with it. Naruto's chakra signature was there in the readings, unmistakable and bright. But it wasn't alone. Woven into it with unnatural precision was the Kyuubi's chakra as well, contained, measured, and blended into the structure of the core itself. The ratio displayed on one of the main monitors made her stop cold. 90 to 10. 90% chakra. 10% sakuradite. And somehow, against all reason, the two had been stabilized into something the machine could accept. Kushina's eyes widened. Then her gaze shifted to the power readout. It was still climbing. But the number already on the screen was enough to make even her go still. 5,000% increase in output. For a second, she simply stared. Then she slowly looked back at Minato. You're serious? His eyes returned to the core luminous, blue irises reflecting the pale light burning off its surface. Yes, he said quietly. Kushina folded her arms, but there was no real anger left in the gesture now. Just concern. Concern, and the growing realization that Minato had already thought this through far beyond the point of reckless theory. If that thing works, she said, it won't just be a nightmare. Minato's expression hardened slightly. No, he agreed. It won't. Kushina looked back at the core again, at the impossible mixture of Naruto's chakra and the fox's power burning inside it like a captured sun. So who's building this nightmare? She asked. Rakshata Chala, Minato answered. And she has already built it. Then he pressed a button. A sealed door along the far wall split open, revealing a hidden hangar beyond. Kushina's eyes widened. Two nightmares stood inside. Spotlights from the launch bay snapped on over the first frame as the cables holding up a black covering released all at once. The sheet slid free, revealing a massive 16-foot nightmare in a dark blue and black color scheme. Its armor was thick across the chest, arms, and legs, yet somehow elegant too, built to look both durable and ceremonial. It carried 3 Faxsphere sensors in total, one on each shoulder and a third set directly into the center of the chest. Its land spinner propulsion systems were folded directly into the backs of its legs instead of mounted along the sides, giving the whole machine a cleaner, more predatory silhouette. The head was crowned by a leaf-shaped spike that angled down over the face, the tip resting between 2 narrow, watchful eyes. This is the Izanami, Minato said quietly. Kushina took another step closer. The machine carried 4 Harkins in total, one on either side of the chest and one mounted along the top of each wrist. Beneath each wrist sat an ejector port that housed its primary weapons, Harkin fans. Each fan was made up of 10 flat Harkin blades joined together by Rakshata's section booster technology. The effect was ingenious. Izanami could launch them one at a time, in small clusters, or all at once. When combined, the fans could also function as brutal MVS melee weapons, turning the Nightmare's arms into slashing discs of layered steel. In the center of each palm sat a circular emitter intended for chakra-based attacks, but Rakshata had clearly gone further than that. Radiant wave technology had been integrated into the system as well. At the left hip rested a long MVS Kodachi in a brilliant black and green sheath. And on its back, Kushina's eyes narrowed. 2 large folded joints rested there, sleek and compact for now. Then realization hit her. Minato. He did not answer. He didn't need to. Rakshata had done it. She had implemented something nightmares had only theorized being able to get. Flight. The second bank of spotlights flared to life over the remaining frame, and the black sheet covering it fell away. The second nightmare stood taller, 18 feet, and immediately gave off a more aggressive presence. Where Izanami was dark forest green and black, this one was black and crimson, the red running across the armor in sharp, violent lines that made it look like a war machine built from shadow and blood. It was clearly designed as Izanami's twin, but only in the broadest sense. The frame was heavier through the shoulders and chest, the silhouette more severe. It carried 6 Harkins instead of 4, one on each shoulder, one on either side of the chest, and one on top of each wrist. Like the first, there were ejector ports under each wrist. But instead of Harkin fans, these ports deployed a pair of MVS daggers shaped after Minato's Horaishin Kunai. A nearly indestructible cable ran from the ring at the base of each dagger, powered by an internal Harkin booster. The weapons could be launched and reeled back almost instantly, driven straight through enemy nightmares, or kept in hand for close combat. The only limitation was the cable itself, strong enough to survive almost anything, but rigid enough that the daggers could only be thrown in straight lines. The palms carried energy emitters of their own. A pair of MVS Kodachi were mounted at either side of the cockpit. And like Izanami, this second machine also bore a set of folded flight joints across its back. Minato looked up at it, then at Kushina. And this is the Izanagi, he said. Kushina stood in silence, looking between the two machines. One blue and black. One black and crimson. Twins, but not the same. One looked like a guardian. The other looked like the thing sent after whatever threatened it. And suddenly, with the core luminous still burning behind her and the two nightmares standing in the hidden hangar before her, Kushina understood exactly how serious Minato had been from the beginning. Then another thought hit her. She turned sharply toward him. Minato, that first nightmare. Her eyes shifted back toward Izanami. Who is it made for? Minato let out a slow breath. Then he met her eyes. Mito. Kushina froze. For 1 second, she just stared at him as if she had misheard. Then all at once her face changed. Mito. She shouted. Her voice rang through the lab hard enough to bounce off the metal walls. I already feel conflicted enough about Naruto going out there, and now you're telling me you had a nightmare built for our daughter too. Kushina demanded, turning fully toward him now. There is no way in hell I'm letting our little girl follow her brother into a fight. Minato didn't argue. He just stood there and let her get it out, and that more than anything made her stop. Because when Kushina finally looked at him again, she saw it. The exhaustion. The agreement. The fact that he hated this too. Minato sighed. I know. Kushina's anger faltered, though it didn't disappear. He looked toward the Izanami again. I understand exactly how this sounds, he said quietly. And I don't want Mito anywhere near a battlefield either. Then why? Kushina shot back. Minato was silent for a second before answering. Because if Mito ignores us and decides to follow Naruto anyway, he said, I would rather there be something in place to protect her than nothing at all. That hit harder than Kushina wanted it to. Because it sounded like Mito. Too much like Mito. Quiet. Stubborn. The type to wait until the exact wrong moment to prove she'd already made up her mind. Kushina looked away, jaw tight. You really think she'd do it? Minato's answer came without hesitation. Yes. Quite possibly. Kushina shut her eyes for a moment. Because the worst part was so did she. Her arms folded tighter across her chest as she stared at Izanami in silence. A machine built for Naruto was one thing. That alone was enough to keep her awake at night. But seeing another one standing beside it, built with Mito in mind, made everything feel more real than it had a moment ago. She's still our little girl, Kushina said at last, her voice lower now. Minato stepped closer. I know, he said. Kushina looked back at him then, anger still there, but softened now by fear. For all of Naruto's recklessness, she said, Mito is the one who scares me more. That got Minato's attention. Kushina's gaze shifted back to the Izanami. Because Naruto charges straight at danger, she said. Mito will smile, say nothing, and follow him into it when no one is looking. Minato's expression darkened slightly. He couldn't deny it. Neither of them could. So the two of them stood there in the pale lab light, Surrounded by the hum of machines and the silent presence of the nightmares waiting in the hidden hangar, both of them understanding the same thing. This wasn't preparation for a possibility anymore. It was preparation for their children possibly becoming part of something neither of them had been able to keep them out of. Naruto eventually managed to shake off his fangirls, though just barely. His blazer was torn in 2 places, his shirt was half untucked, and his hair looked even worse than usual from how many hands had nearly gotten on him before he escaped. He was still catching his breath when he spotted the masked cat slipping through an open window into one of the buildings. "There you are," Naruto muttered. He took off at once, sprinting toward the entrance. But the second he rounded the corner, he stopped short. So did the other 2 boys arriving at nearly the exact same time. For one stunned second, all 3 of them just stared at each other. "Naruto!" Lelouch and Suzaku shouted at once, wide-eyed. Naruto blinked, then looked between them as he almost collapsed to the ground. "That's my name, don't wear it out." Suzaku was the first one to recover enough to actually look at him properly. "What happened to you?" he asked, genuinely shocked. Naruto looked like he had just survived a war of a very specific kind. His blazer hung loosely off one shoulder, his white shirt was wrinkled and partially untucked, there were a few scratches on his face, and bits of dirt clung to him in a way that made him look far rougher than he actually was. Naruto wiped a bit of sweat from his brow. "My fangirls decided this was the perfect chance to have their way with me," he said flatly. "I barely escaped." Suzaku stared. I'm sorry," he frowned. "Fangirls." Naruto gave him a dead look. "Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory." Lelouch, still breathing harder than he wanted either of them to notice, straightened slightly. "The fact is that it still seems exaggerated." Naruto turned toward him at once. "It is not exaggerated." Then he looked back at Suzaku. "Since I'm the son and heir of the most profitable company in the world, a lot of girls around here look at me like I'm fresh meat and feel that if they snagged me they will become the most powerful woman in the world." Suzaku's brow rose. "Not that it's really my business," he said, "but isn't having a lot of girls after you supposed to be a good thing?" Lelouch gave a faint nod. "I have a few admirers around school. They don't seem particularly dangerous." Naruto stared at both of them in disbelief. "You have admirers, Lelouch. That is not the same thing." He folded his arms. "And yes, in theory, a bunch of girls after you sounds fine. But don't let the name fool you. Fangirls are not normal girls." He shuddered. "They're demons wearing school uniforms. Sometimes literally armed with banners." For some reason, both Suzaku and Lelouch found themselves shivering a little too. Then a sharp meow cut through the moment. All 3 of them looked up. The cat had climbed higher. "There," Naruto said, pointing. "It's on the roof. Let's go." He bolted for the stairs immediately, Suzaku right behind him. Lelouch took off after them a second later. "Suzaku, Naruto, wait. Don't go up there." But the student council president said to catch it, Suzaku called back. "And I want this over before somebody else finds it," Naruto added. Lelouch gritted his teeth and tried to keep up. "Don't worry about it. I'll get the cat." Suzaku glanced back with the faintest hint of an old teasing smile. "I was always more agile than you. Remember when that little bird got loose?" Lelouch shot him a look. "Stop bringing up ancient history." Naruto snorted and looked over his shoulder. "Ancient history. Just the other day Colin knocked the air out of you with one punch." Suzaku chuckled. "I see your luck with women hasn't improved in 7 years. "Shut up," Lelouch snapped, though without much heat. "For someone who's supposed to be sick and feeble, Colin punches very hard. I'm pretty sure she cracked something." "Excuses," Naruto said with a grin. Then he and Suzaku pushed ahead, leaving Lelouch a few steps behind. "They're both still exercise maniacs," Lelouch muttered to himself before following them out through the upper window. By the time they reached the bell tower roof, a small crowd had gathered below. The rest of the student council was there. A few nearby students too. And Mito, who had arrived just in time to look up and see the 3 idiots chasing a cat across the roof like this was a normal way to spend an afternoon. The cat had backed itself near the bell, its head still hidden awkwardly by the thing stuck on top of it. Naruto had the easiest time moving across the sloped roof, sticking to it with chakra while Suzaku had to carefully crawl upward on his stomach. Lelouch, meanwhile, was trying his best to follow without dying. How are you doing that? Suzaku asked, glancing at Naruto in amazement. Naruto grinned. Trade secret. From below, Mito watched Suzaku inch forward with careful determination and, despite herself, felt the smallest flicker of approval. Good job, Suzaku, she thought quietly, not saying a word as she looked up at him. You're actually keeping up with Naruto. Lelouch, still climbing behind them, was less impressed. He watched the other two draw closer to the cat and frowned. I understand Naruto wanting to catch it, he thought. But Suzaku too. Since when does he follow along with this kind of madness? Then his foot slipped. The sound that came out of him was not dignified. Both Naruto and Suzaku snapped around instantly. Lelouch was sliding toward the edge of the roof, fingers clawing uselessly for purchase as the crowd below gasped all at once. Lelouch! Suzaku shouted. Damn it! Naruto cursed, cutting off the chakra in his feet and launching himself downward at the same time Suzaku moved. Hang on. Lelouch tried very hard not to panic. A second later, each of his hands was caught. Naruto had one. Suzaku had the other. The crowd below let out a collective breath of relief. But Lelouch barely noticed. Because just beyond them, the cat had finally managed to shake the thing off its head. The mask rolled down the roof and caught on a ledge before it could fall. Lelouch's eyes widened for a second. Then relief hit him so hard he almost sagged. At least that disaster had been avoided. A moment later, Naruto and Suzaku hauled him back up onto the roof. By the time Naruto came back out through the building entrance, Suzaku had gone ahead with the cat, while Lelouch hung back for reasons only Naruto fully understood. The second Naruto stepped outside, he found Suzaku facing a tense circle of students and council members, all unsure how exactly they were supposed to react. Naruto took one look around and understood it immediately. No one knew what to do. So he fixed it. Walking up behind Suzaku, Naruto clapped him on the back, hard enough to make the other boy stumble half a step. Good job up there, Suzaku. Suzaku blinked and looked back at him. Huh. That was enough to break the tension. Shirley rushed forward first. You saved him. Thank you so much. Rivals came right after her. Yeah, nice one, Naruto. And you too, new guy. Millie, of course, had only one priority. That cat was carrying something, wasn't it? Suzaku nodded. Yeah, something was on its head. But I didn't get a good look at it. Everyone looked at Naruto next. He lied without blinking. Me neither. Whatever it was, Millie declared dramatically, it must be the embarrassing secret Lelouch's been hiding. So that's your conclusion, Madam President. Lelouch's voice came from the shadows behind Naruto and Suzaku as he stepped out looking far calmer than he had any right to. Millie and Shirley both looked weirdly disappointed by that. Then Colin asked the question everyone else was clearly thinking. So, do you two know each other? Suzaku opened his mouth, probably intending to deny or deflect or do something else pointlessly polite. Lelouch beat him to it. He's my friend, he said clearly. That stunned at least half the people standing there. Then, before anyone could recover, Lelouch looked to Millie. Madam President, would you permit him to join the student council? The rules are clear. Every student has to join a club. Millie put on a thoughtful expression for all of 2 seconds before smiling. Well, since the vice president himself is asking, I suppose I can't refuse. That settled it. The whole atmosphere lightened almost immediately. Nunnally wheeled herself forward next. Well then, she said brightly, come here, you two. Naruto, you two. Give me an ear. All three boys exchanged confused looks. Then leaned down. Nunnally quickly kissed each of them on the cheek. Suzaku blinked first. Nunnally. There, she said with a warm little smile. That's your reward. Since you three caught the cat, you'll just have to settle for me. I'm almost a real council member. Naruto chuckled softly at that. Nunnally really was too pure for any of this. All right then. Rivals shouted. Let's celebrate catching the cat. And naturally the new guy is paying. Or our rich friend here. He slung an arm over Naruto's shoulder. Sure thing, Naruto said dryly. Oh, get off him, Shirley scolded, before turning to Suzaku with a smile. Hi, I'm Shirley. Nice to meet you. Oh right, and I'm Rivals. Millie Ashford, student council president, Millie added proudly. Nina hesitated for a second, glancing first at Suzaku, then at Naruto. She clearly remembered what Naruto had told her before about giving Suzaku a chance before judging him. In the end, she stepped forward just enough to speak. I'm Nina. Suzaku looked at all of them, then smiled. The pleasure is mine. And over the next half hour, the student council dragged Suzaku through the clubhouse, explaining duties, rules, and all the nonsense that came with being part of the group. Somehow, impossibly, by the end of it all, it almost felt like he belonged there. Minato hurried out of the lab the moment his secretary informed him that the viceroy had arrived. After taking a few minutes to clean up, he returned to his office and settled behind his desk just as there was a knock at the door. Come in, Minato said, setting his pen down. The door opened, and a black-haired woman stepped aside with a bow, allowing the guests she had escorted to enter before quietly shutting the door behind them. The first two to step inside were men dressed in matching military uniforms. Dark red coats trimmed with gold, black shoulder guards, blue sashes at the waist, white gloves, white trousers tucked into polished boots. One wore glasses and carried himself with a quiet elegance. The other was broader, rougher, with a scar across his face and the solid build of a man more used to battle than courtrooms. They moved apart the moment they entered, making room for the woman behind them. Cornelia Lee Britannia strode forward without hesitation. She stopped in front of Minato's desk, her white cape settling behind her as her two knights remained near the door. Please, Minato said evenly, gesturing to the seat across from him. Have a seat, Viceroy. Cornelia took the offered chair without a word. A second later, the office door opened again. Kushina stepped in. She said nothing at first, only gave Minato a brief look before moving to stand off to the side of the room. Cornelia's eyes shifted toward her for a moment, but she did not comment. You clearly know who I am, Cornelia said at last. These are two of my personal knights, Guilford and Darlton. Both men gave short nods. Cornelia looked back at Minato. Now introduce yourself. It was not a request. Of course, Minato said calmly. Minato Namikaze. Founder of Namikaze Corporation. Cornelia did not waste time. Then you can start by telling me what exactly you hope to achieve by helping the 11s rebuild Shinjuku. Minato was quiet for only a second. Kushina's eyes shifted to him, sharp and watchful. He understood the look immediately. Minato folded his hands on the desk. First, he said, allow me to say that I mean no disrespect to either you or the Britannian Empire. Cornelia gave the slightest nod. Go on. Minato met her gaze. I never agreed with the conditions Britannia leaves its conquered people in, let alone how my fellow countrymen despite the fact I am half Britannian, he said simply. And because Naruto is the one overseeing the reconstruction personally, I've had reason to think carefully about how he sees the situation. Cornelia's expression sharpened slightly at the mention of Naruto. Minato continued. If I were to put it into words, he said, I think my son would say this, that rebuilding Shinjuku is a way of giving people back some piece of the lives they lost. Cornelia watched him closely. So this is about pity. No, Minato said. Not pity. And not guilt either. He glanced briefly toward the window before looking back at her. It is about stability. A person who has nothing left will always have a reason to hate. A person who has been given back even part of what was taken from them is far less likely to keep reaching for war. Kushina stayed silent, but the look she gave him made it clear she understood exactly what he was doing. Cornelia considered that. You believe rebuilding Shinjuku helps Britannia? In a practical sense, yes, Minato replied. If the Japanese people begin to feel that life can improve, then the anger driving them toward resistance begins to weaken. Not entirely. There will always be those who continue fighting. But fewer of them will have support. That seemed to interest her. And what is your opinion of Zero and Madara? At that, Cornelia gestured slightly toward the television to her right. The screen was frozen on an image of the two masked figures. Minato's eyes shifted toward it. Kushina gave him another warning glance. He understood that one too. They're both dangerous, Minato said. Cornelia leaned back slightly. Go on. Zero is the obvious threat, Minato said. He is visible, ideological, and already capable of turning unrest into momentum. There is also the possibility that he has some kind of connection within the military, given the incident involving Jeremiah. Cornelia's face did not change. And Madara? Minato's expression sharpened slightly. Madara concerns me more. That got her full attention. Why? Because Zero, at least, announces himself, Minato said. We know where he stands. Madara is less clear. He paused for a moment. He claims to fight to protect, but we do not yet know by what means or to what limit. We don't know whether he works alone, whether anyone supports him, or how he accomplished the speed and destructive force he displayed. Cornelia's eyes narrowed. You think it's technology? It's possible, Minato said. A specialized suit. Advanced personal equipment. Something designed to enhance physical performance. Cornelia studied him carefully. Technology your company could provide. No, Minato answered immediately. The answer came clean enough that even Kushina turned her eyes to him for a second. Namikaze Corporation does not conduct weapons research, he said. And I keep a careful record of what every division is developing, as does my wife. We ensure that no one is developing something can cause anything to shake the values we hold. Cornelia gave a slow nod. She did not say whether she believed him. Only accepted the answer for what it was worth in the moment. Very well, she said at last. Then I suppose you are wondering why I requested this meeting on such short notice. Minato inclined his head slightly. It had crossed my mind. Sub-Viceroy Euphemia has expressed her support for the reconstruction of Shinjuku, Cornelia said. Because of that, I wanted to see for myself what kind of people were leading the effort. Her gaze shifted once, briefly, to Kushina before returning to Minato. I will make this clear. So long as your activities do not endanger the settlement, the empire, or my sister, you will have no trouble from the government without my direct order or hers. Kushina's expression tightened slightly at that. Minato stood. I understand, he said. Thank you for informing me, Viceroy. Cornelia rose from her chair. Guilford opened the door for her immediately. She had almost stepped through it when she stopped and glanced back over her shoulder. Oh, and one more thing, Mr. Namikaze. In a few days, Cornelia said, your company may be given the opportunity to assist with the reconstruction of another ghetto. Then she left. Guilford and Darlton followed without a word, and the door shut behind them. Silence settled over the office. Kushina was the first to break it. That sounded ominous. Minato leaned back against the edge of his desk, eyes fixed on the closed door. Yes, he said quietly. It did. Kushina folded her arms. What do you think she meant? Minato was silent for a moment. Then he let out a slow breath through his nose. I'm not sure, he admitted. But I doubt it's anything simple. Kushina looked at the television again, at the frozen images of Zero and Madara. Then back at Minato. In Naruto. Minato's gaze shifted too. Toward the same screen. Toward the same chaos their son was already circling. I think, he said at last, that however Naruto feels about Shinjuku now. His eyes hardened slightly. He's going to have even less patience for whatever comes next. The next day, every student at Ashford Academy was once again gathered in the auditorium for Prince Clovis's funeral. This time attendance was mandatory, which meant Naruto had no choice but to be there. The students stood in orderly lines as they faced the giant screen at the front of the room. Naruto stood near the front between Lelouch and Suzaku, his expression neutral as the broadcast showed the mourners gathered in the capital city of Pendragon before finally settling on a massive portrait of Clovis holding a rose, a podium positioned before it. Then a man stepped up to the podium. He looked every bit the ruler of an empire that had swallowed nations whole. Age had touched him, but it had not weakened him. If anything, the years had only made him seem heavier, more imposing, like time itself had only sharpened the weight of his presence. White hair framed a face that seemed carved from authority and pride. Before them all stood the 98th Emperor of the Holy Britannian Empire. Charles Z. Britannia. All men are not created equal, the Emperor declared. Naruto kept his face still, though the scowl that wanted to form nearly broke through anyway. Beside him, Lelouch's distaste sharpened almost instantly, while Suzaku's discomfort settled into a quieter, tighter silence. Some are born swifter afoot, some with greater beauty, some are born into poverty and others born sick and feeble. Both in birth and upbringing, in sheer scope of ability, every human is inherently different. Naruto's jaw tightened. Just because someone is born into one life doesn't mean they're chained to it forever, he thought. And it sure as hell doesn't mean people can't surpass what the world expects from them. Yes, Charles continued, that is why people discriminate against one another, which is why there is struggle, competition, and the unfaltering march of progress. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Progress built on that kind of thinking only leads to ruin. Inequality is not wrong, the Emperor said. Equality is. Naruto's hands curled faintly at his sides. What gives you the right to say that? To stand there with everything and tell the rest of the world what they deserve to have? What of the EU, which made equality a right? Rabble politics by popularity contest. The Chinese Federation with its equal distribution of wealth. A nation of lazy dullards. The Emperor's voice rolled on without pause. And the Namikaze Corporation, for all its accomplishments, is led by a man rumored to believe that uplift, respect, and equal dignity can be granted to all, despite the obvious differences in class, breeding, and ability. That did it. Naruto's glare flashed for only a second, but it was there, sharp, angry, and impossible to completely hide. A few nearby students whispered at once. A few rows away, Mito felt the shift in him immediately. She glanced toward Naruto and saw it for herself. The tension in his shoulders, the anger buried just beneath his calm expression, the way his eyes had hardened at the mention of their father. Then the moment passed, and Naruto forced his face still again. But not our beloved Britannia, Charles declared. We fight, we compete, evolution is continuous. Britannia alone moves forward, advancing steadily into the future. Naruto stared at the screen. And every nation in your path gets trampled into darkness for it. Even the death of my son, Clovis, demonstrates Britannia's unswerving commitment to progress. We will fight on, we shall struggle, compete, plunder, and dominate, and in the end, the future shall be ours. Naruto's expression remained impassive, but his thoughts burned. And what happens to those who refuse to kneel to your future? Do you crush them too? Burn their homes, bury their people, and call it progress. All hail Britannia. The cry thundered back from the screen and echoed through the auditorium as the mourners in Pendragon shouted their emperor's words with absolute devotion. Naruto closed his eyes for a brief moment. Britannia has to change, he thought quietly. Or one day it'll be destroyed by the weight of everything it's done. Then he opened his eyes again and stood in silence, listening as the chants of the empire rolled on around him.